Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Grab Matters podcast. Today we welcome on a very special guest, Ben Greenwood. We talk with Ben Greenwood about growing up in the Northeast, getting started wakeboarding up there, moving down to Florida after graduating college, living with Keith Lyman, and making him sleep in a tent in the backyard. We talk video parts, Ben's unique style, grabbing, poking, tweaking his board. And then we talk about transitioning from being a pro rider to a behind-the-scenes role with Wakeboarding Mag, the decline of the print magazine, what kind of happened to Wake Awards, and what the future might look like for a Wake Awards type show. We talk about a bunch more with Benny G. It's a great episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you enjoy.
I approve waterboarding.
They're talking about wakeboarding. The thing about wakeboarding, every trick is an invert.
Backside.
One side, air railing.
A new dimension.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Grab Matters podcast. Today we welcome on a very special guest, Ben Greenwood. Ben, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you.
Thanks for coming out here, man. Stoked to chat with you. I'm sure a lot of people are stoked to hear this one. Start off with a few quick questions. Wake pants, yes or no?
I'm kind of like a sure, go for it. Maybe not for me, but I also did wear a backwards Red Sox hat for one of
So
my...
we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, so I have no...
Middle of the road. Won't wear them, but won't dog them.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Favorite grab?
Probably mute.
Mute.
Yeah.
I think that might be the first mute that we've gotten.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else or just straight up mute?
Yeah, well, and it's like, switch, mute, whatever's. I like the look of a lot of it, and like just the grabbing deep. Like it takes effort to get there. Kind of like, I guess if you could say least favorite, I'd say like tail or nose. They're just like lazy to me.
Okay. On the ends there is just...
It's just really easy to get
less
up.
effort.
Well, it's easy to get up into your hand.
Yeah.
Right? You just a little
Kind of
angle
pull
of
it
your
back
feet,
up and
it basically lands in your hand. So in my judging days, I used to be like, yeah, he grabbed it, but it was like his hand was basically there. So to me, grabbing mute on things like meant that you had to work to get into that position.
100%. Yeah, definitely. Who do you think will win Roadie this year?
Good question.
Because at the time of this recording, it hasn't been released or come out yet. So
Yeah. And please do excuse if I say somebody that's already won, but I do keep close tabs on what's going on. But
I mean, it's okay if nobody jumps out.
No. Actually, no. There's two. I mean, I'd say what like Thomas did. I think he will get his dues, but I don't. If we're speaking of like the Alliance Rider of the Year,
Correct. Yeah.
yeah, then I'd say, I mean, my vote would go for someone like a Sam Brown.
Okay.
Like, I just think what that kid does is like completely mind blowing.
Yeah.
And he does things that, I mean, this has been said before, I'm sure, but it doesn't look like anything I ever dreamed wakeboarding could look like. And it still looks good. Like I was always this, if you add too much to this, you start to lose the flow or the cool part of the trick because you just have to do too much.
Mm-hmm.
Just in my head, I guess. But with the stuff Sam does, I'm like, how did he make that look good?
And how did he grab it for so long yet still spin
Totally.
this many degrees? So
Yep.
yeah, that's a good answer. We'll see. I don't know when that. I'm assuming somewhat soon it'll probably come out for last year.
Yeah, I don't remember when they put that out.
Are you? I mean, do they involve the past roadies in?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
At least not that I know of. They did for the first few years, and that was actually really cool to sit around with like the other guys and have a few beers and just talk through some stuff. I think it's probably a logistics thing, and then after a while, you don't want too many people.
Because there's probably 30 or 25 now, 20 or maybe a little over 20 roadies.
Well, I was 2005, and there was like 4 before me, I think.
Yeah, it's about 20.
Chad, Aaron, Grubb. I think Parks and Randall. Yeah, Parks and Randall that one year where they shared it.
Okay, but Randall got it again in 2007 or something like that.
He's
okay.
the only one. He's won it 1.5 times.
Well, I mean, if you didn't need to know any more about Randall, that kind of tells you a lot there.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Nobody better to have more than one.
I totally agree with that. Let's talk early days. So, we'll jump back into young Benny G. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in central Massachusetts. Bolton, Mass is where I went to high school. Learned to get out behind the boat just over the border in New Hampshire. We had a cottage on a lake that I have like just the most fond memories of. It's like my sisters and I shared a room. There was like a foot pail to dunk your foot into. Like, we had this my parents slept out on the porch. It was just like a summer cottage that was closed up for most of the year. And learned to water ski behind the little John boat that we had, 15 horse. Learned to ski on 2 skis when, I was like 4 or 5 or something like that. Started to slalom ski, and then I was trying to like jump on my slalom ski. I was trying to like catch air and like didn't know what I was doing, but I just thought that was pretty fun. And then a guy on our lake had a scurfer, and they had a ski centurion. That's what it's called, the ski centurion. And he was just doing fashion airs up and down the lake, and I'm, like, I gotta be that guy one day. He was older, and so I was just a young kid. So my parents got me a scurfer for my 12th birthday. And then, so anyway, that was my intro to the sport.
Okay. Before that scurfer, were you into any other sports? Because obviously you're in the Northeast. Is snowboarding a part of your life then too, or?
Nope. Didn't snowboard until I was about 26.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't have expected that.
Yep. Grew up skiing. I was on snow skis when I was like 3. 4.
Okay. So you were on the mountain though.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Tons of days. My dad and I used to pull me out of school to go do a little ski trip. Just he and I. We take family vacations, and so yeah, I snow skied quite a bit.
Were you ski racer or just freestyle?
I raced. It's funny. I raced because I got extra time at the mountain. So like our school would do like the Wednesdays trip to the mountain thing. And you would get extra time if you did like the NASTAR thing, I think it was called.
Yeah, it was NASTAR.
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. It wasn't what I loved. I liked sort of the bumps and, then just like learning tricks and
messing around on the mountain.
Yeah. And then I think I probably and then I was starting to do like the actual, when there was, it was actually before there were parks, before like snowboard parks were just a thing everywhere. It was just sort of, you just find a hit somewhere. So we were doing like, 360s and grabs. I think I did a 720 one time and stuff like that. So it was
wow.
Like, yeah.
Okay.
But, the funny part about that is, I picked up a snowboard when I was well into my 20s. So, I was very, very comfortable standing sideways now. Obviously learning how to use or not use the handle because you just rely on it so much, was difficult. Picked it up like, okay, and spent, I guess, probably close to 15 years only snowboarding. Hadn't touched a pair of skis, but I was only getting maybe 5 days a year, something like that. I decided at one of the WSIA Summit conferences at Steamboat, I was like, all right, I'll rent skis the first day because I hadn't done it in so long, and then I'll rent a snowboard the second day. And I got off the lift, took about 3 turns, and I was better on those 3 turns than I was in the 15 years of snowboarding.
Yeah.
And I never went back. So,
well, skiing's easy, right?
It is.
It is. Yeah. And especially, big mountain skiing and stuff, you have so much better suspension. You can really haul ass.
Yeah. So I was just way more comfortable.
That makes sense. Okay. So you were on the lake, cottage, kind of wasn't living on a lake full time. I'm guessing this is kind of like vacationing in the summer.
Yeah. It was a place that we would spend, June, July, August at, it was like our home away from home. It's not like we would split our time. We would kind of like the new base for home would be the cottage. And then by the time I got my license, I'd be like, well, my friends and I can hang out over here because my parents aren't there, or more so just like chasing when I could ride again. Okay. Because we never had a wakeboard boat at that place. It was always just like an outboard, whatever.
So you never kind of upgraded the boat as you went along through the years?
In a way, yes, but not to the point of like getting an inboard boat.
Okay.
We had an outboard. It went from the John boat to like the tri-hull outboard, and then it was a an inboard outboard. It was like the Monte Carlo by Ebco.
Okay.
Like that was a very it was like a big deal for us, but it was still never an inboard. So like the cool part about that story is that the first inboard boat that a Greenwood ever had was the first one I got for free, which is like, I don't think that happens very often.
That probably has never happened. I mean, maybe, but it'd be a rarity.
Yeah. So it was cool because it was like, I turned down a contract from a major boat company that was going to pay me. And I said, great. So like, what about the boat? And they were like, well, probably not. And I said, okay, well, what if I have a great year? What if I kind of proved myself? This is before Rider of the Year. And they're like, yeah, no, probably not. And I said, I can't take it. Like I kind of want the boat. And the weird thing was I didn't need a boat because I was at the wakeboard camp. We had plenty of boats and plenty of friends, but it was kind of like,
I'm going to ride for a boat company.
yeah,
I want to ride on that boat. That's my boat.
yeah. So it was kind of a cool deal.
So walk through that progression. Like you said, you got your license. You're kind of spending some time on the water. What's the progression like from that scurfer all the way up until, high school, maybe early college days of riding?
Yeah. So like the scurfer days was like, from about 12 to 13, 14 maybe. And then, just learning to kind of jump the wake. I don't know if I ever jumped the wake toe side, but it was just sort of this thing that, I was obsessed with. My sisters hated it because I was just like, kept doing laps around the lake, but then the HO Hyperlight Pro, well, the HO Hyperlight came out and then the Pro came out. So the first compression molded, ski boards, so to speak. But I got one of those for my birthday. I guess that would have been 15th birthday, something like that. And Eric Perez was doing a clinic. He was coming through. And of course, I videotaped every Hot Summer Nights, episode. I rewatched it, would wear the tapes out. But Eric Perez was coming through to do a clinic. And, I begged my parents, like, please, please, please. And they're like, yeah, obviously this is something that you're like super passionate about. So I got to go out with him. And that started to connect me to a local marina. I got my first job when I was like 15, sweeping floors, pumping gas, covering boats, cleaning them, selling beer and cigarettes. It was like, it was right on the border of Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So, for sales tax reasons, people would be like, oh, well, it's cheaper to get all that stuff here because they would obviously take the New Hampshire benefits. And then like the lottery, it was just so funny because I'm like selling beer and cigarettes, lotto tickets just to be connected to the marina that sold a couple wakeboards, sold a couple boats. But there were this group of guys on that lake that were super into kneeboarding at the time. They were like just badass kneeboard guys. As the progression goes, they got a little bit older. They were super into air chairing. A couple of the guys that I worked with, they had boats, that we could go out behind. And then I learned my first back roll, my first flip. And these guys had found out about it and they would ask me to come out with them because they wanted the kid that could do the flip behind the wakeboard. So I basically interesting. I've never said this out loud, but it's interesting that I cared more about like how it was viewed than how hard the trick could be, because basically these guys took me out wakeboarding every day for free because they wanted me to be the one behind their boat. So I don't know. It's like, in your podcast, you had mentioned about like, you didn't wakeboard to like beat anybody. My draw was always to like how it looked.
Yeah.
And, the first time I saw an actual video, like Scott Byerly, and you're just like, oh my God, like
that looks good.
That's what I was like super drawn to.
Okay. So speaking of videos, were there any videos, you said Scott Byerly, I mean, Eric came through, but were there any videos that you were watching back in the day that, you said you're wearing out some tapes of Hot Summer Nights, but any movies and stuff?
Yeah. Gravity Sucks. Daily Dose, the Hyperlight team movie. So long ago that Brian Grubb was wakeboarding in it, which he's awesome. He was really good at it. Daily Dose, still have the soundtrack memorized.
Okay.
You know?
Any favorite riders that come to mind?
Sean
besides-
Murray.
Sean Murray.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so I was a big Darren Shapiro fan when he came along, just went huge and all that stuff. And then I've said this before, but when I realized what Scott Byerly was all about and what his riding was all about, I felt bad that I didn't like Darren as much anymore. But like in a way, it's not that I didn't like him as much. It was sort of like I have a new favorite and I felt bad for Darren. I'm like, but he probably wouldn't have noticed or cared unless I said it on your podcast. So Darren, it's nothing personal, but I was drawn to.
I think he'd
Scott's.
understand.
Yeah.
I think he might understand.
And then over the years, then Sean Murray, I was a big Sean Murray fanboy. I had his blue vest, the fluid. I had the rainbow, the rainbow fluid, and then the Volkswagen. The boat.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay. Do you remember the first edition of Wakeboarding Mag? Did you have that?
I got the second one. I picked up the second one at that marina that we would frequent. So I don't think I still have it, unfortunately, my personal copy. But it was the second issue that I picked up. Yeah.
Okay. Early on, so it sounds like you had a strong desire to wakeboard, and you kind of mentioned, I said that I didn't do it to beat anybody. You said you kind of did it to, how it looked and all that stuff. What were some things that drew you to it so strongly at a young age?
I mean, the feeling of it, obviously. Yeah, I was a big feeling guy too. So parallel to, caring about how it looked, what trumped that was how it felt, because there were tricks that I did that maybe looked in a way that I was trying to get to. That was always sort of the push and pull of maybe my progression and how I looked at it. But, the feeling, the sounds, a lot of people down here don't understand, but like what summertime means to you as a kid up north, it's like summertime sucks down here. Like I have young kids and we built a pool because we were like, it's too hot to do anything. It's hard, I mean, you get on the water, but there's going to be a thunderstorm, it's like, yeah, I live here. I'm not moving, but summer sucks. Up north, there's no school. The weather's finally awesome.
Everybody else is like ecstatic about the summertime as well. It's an energy, it feels like.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally. And,
especially on lakes.
Yeah. And that was that was a part of it. It was like my dad would, I'd sit there and wait for him to come home from work. And as soon as he was home, he's like, let's go, and then weekends I'd, ride 4 or 5 times. And it's sort of that, like always chasing that feeling,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. So graduate high school, you go to college, right?
I did.
So where'd you go? What'd you study?
I went to Skidmore College, which is in Saratoga Springs, New York, just north of Albany. I was a business major, which was kind of because I didn't really know what else I wanted to do.
The classic default for, a lot of people.
Yeah, it was either psychology or... and at that time, I had sort of like... Well, I chose the school because of the town that it was in, and it fit a lot of the things I was looking for. I guess it was a good school. I knew it was, but it's funny because now in my older years, when I mentioned that I went there, people are like, "Oh, well, it's a really good school." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, all my friends went to Ivy League." I was like, well, not all of them, but a lot of them. The cool part about the transition from sort of the New Hampshire scene to the upstate New York scene was I would come home from college in the summers and work at the marina still. And then I broke my ankle, pretty bad. It was on a clinic with Scott Hussey, who was rolling through town. He was a guy from Maine competing on the tour, and a family that had come into the marina a few times with a bunch of young boys. They were like, "Hey, we saw you at the local INT contest. A pro's coming through. Do you want to come ride with him?" And I was like, "Yeah, definitely." So the first year he came through, I learned 6 new inverts in one day. And it was sort of this thing of like, I'd never had anybody tell me what to do or tell me that I could do it. I was just sort of trial and error and flipping through the magazines and watching videos. But, and it got to the point where he was like, have you tried this? Try it. And then I'd just try it and land it. And then that was cool. It was amazing. But then he came back the next year. Of course, I'm all excited. Now I'm like, I'm going to try some technical tricks and all these kinds of things. And he was teaching. We were driving triple ups because we knew how to hit double ups. But he's like, all right, this is a triple up. Check this out. And so I cut in, not really realizing what a triple up was. I just thought I was hitting a double up. Didn't realize you got to treat it a little bit different. And I cut in for a Rayleigh. So I, probably not the best choice, but got super stargazed, 270, landed backwards on my toes from a Rayleigh in the flats, snapped my ankle halfway in the boots that I had just gotten from Hyperlight as my first like free anything, pair of high backs. And that was pretty heartbreaking, to be honest. I'm like cloud nine, riding with this pro that, was like, dude, yeah, pretty good. Try this. Getting my first free, something of significance.
On flow or whatever, yeah.
And then, snapped it right there.
So what year was that in college, you said?
My sophomore year going into my junior year.
Okay.
So then junior year, between junior and senior year, I had made the decision not to go back to New Hampshire. A lot of it was because it took a really, really long time for my ankle to feel like I could even try to wakeboard. It was to the point where I couldn't walk downstairs. But at the time, I didn't get the direction to go through, physical therapy and all that stuff. I actually had the doctor tell me, well, he asked what I was doing because it was such a weird break. And he's like, how did you do this? And I was like, well, it's wakeboarding, and it's whatever. Try to explain it to a doctor while you're in pain and whatever. He's like, well, I don't know what that is, but you probably won't be able to do that again. And I was like, really? So that was, you're telling a 19, 20-year-old dude that
this activity's off the table.
Yeah, which probably made me go, you know what? Like, I actually am going to do that. So I spent a lot of time in a cast, just dreaming of that time to get back on the water. But was trying to also be realistic about, I'm almost graduated from college. I hadn't had an internship yet, kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I got this opportunity to manage at a restaurant. I had no restaurant experience, but it was this program that they were just trying to plug somebody into. You're going to learn all the positions at a restaurant, and then you're going to be the night manager. Come to find out, the reason why was because the owner didn't want to stick around until 4 a.m. when everyone was cleaning up, but it was cool. I mean, it was a good experience. I think everybody should work in a restaurant at some point. I think that's a common phrase, but it teaches you a lot.
Absolutely.
But throughout that school year, it's the wakeboarding bug. My buddies, my roommates would be like, oh, you're watching wakeboarding again, all this stuff. Like I'd watch Board Stock 96, would watch that over and over and over again. And this guy that was in one of my classes was like, hey, I know my buddy Craig Kennedy, he's, up in towards Lake George, a little bit north of Lake George. He's got a nautique. He's out there riding all the time. He's really good. And, you should hit him up. And he gave me his phone number, and I reached out to him a couple times. I'm like, hey, I go to school with Christian, and of course I get it. He's a badass, like Adirondacks, snowboarder, wakeboarder guy. And I'm this kid that went to Skidmore, and it's like all the rich kids from New York went to Skidmore. Right. So I didn't walk away from there with like as many lifelong friends as I have from high school, but he had said, hey, hit him up. So I called Craig a few times asking like, dude, I know I'm 45 minutes away, but I'll drive up. Like, if you can just get a set. And he's like, no, boat's full, man. I'm so sorry. Like by the time I'm done with work and the people that want to come out, it's, there's not much time. I was like, all right, no, I get it. so then finally he said, hey, you know what? Actually, our shop, he managed a outdoor store that also sold wakeboards. And he's like, hey, our shop is actually putting on a demo day. Like, do you want to come up and ride? I was like, yeah, definitely. So I go up there and after I rode, and actually that was the first time I rode since my ankle was broken. Like I had tried at the end of that summer, but it hurt too bad. I couldn't even like jump or anything.
Yeah.
So they said, yeah, come out. And I was like, so excited. And then, fast forward, he would call me to ask me when the next time I could come out with him was. And then I worked for him at his shop. And then he was looking for a way to help pay for his boat. So we started a wakeboard school. And then I became his coach at the wakeboard school.
Okay.
So it was my intro to coaching.
And this is, you're graduated at this point? Or?
Yes. So, I would come up and ride a little bit between that. Wait. I'll have to think about that. But when I started to actually when coaching was my job over the summer, that was right after I graduated.
Okay.
So it was weird. I mean, it was like, a bunch of my friends and people I knew were going on to do they were going in
big boy jobs.
Yeah. They were doing the internship or the 80, 90 hour weeks on Wall Street and, sleeping in the office and putting their dues in, they're all doing extremely well now, which is great for them, but wasn't my path. And then I, slept on couches. I rented a cabin out in the middle of the woods in upstate New York. It was very creepy to think about at this point. It was out of a murder movie, but I don't know. Anyway, it was just a cool time because it was sort of there was no consequences, no expectations. It was just me in a boat all day driving and coaching to be able to ride whenever I could.
So it was a while ago, so maybe you don't remember, but was there ever any weird emotions or feelings you had about seeing all your friends go and do those, crazy things that maybe you were kind of not slated to do, but a lot of people that around you did.
Yeah.
And you're more or less, I'm not gonna say wakeboard bum, but yeah, I mean, you're
exactly
living to ride, riding to live.
I referred to myself as that. It was, and interestingly enough, my dad, he had always said his dream was to move out west and be a ski bum before he had gotten into, he bought his business from his dad. And I give my parents all the credit in the world. They, they raised us well. They, we all went to college and got to graduate with no debt and all those kinds of things. But they were also like, hey, but you're on your own after this. They weren't going to let me starve, but it was you got to figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, but I kind of want to do this wakeboarding thing or just at least move to Florida, and at the time I hadn't moved yet, but, they were like, yeah, go for it. If you got it, that's your passion, go for it. So yes, I did. Maybe had my dad not told me that story about himself, I would have felt too guilty about they just spent all this money on this college and I'm in a boat, hanging out.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a tough time, sponsorship felt, I don't even know what it was all about. But I just loved it. I couldn't get away from it. So,
yeah. Well, it seems like you made a good decision, as we'll get into in a little bit. But we got a Patreon question from Ollie Jerome.
Good.
So yeah, if you guys want to see the guests early, go ahead and jump on that Patreon. You can submit some questions. We got some exclusive content on there as well. It really helps support the podcast. He's wondering, were you the first pro from the Northeast? And then kind of second part of that question, were there a lot of East Coast events and gatherings during that era in terms of wakeboarding?
I'll have to say no, that I was not the first pro. And the one that I do know is my absolute, one of the closest friends, Keith Lyman, was pro before I was, technically. Right. So he was 5 years younger than me. And we can get into that about that whole living situation.
Oh yeah.
In those early days. But Keith was getting paid before I was.
Okay.
And I'd mentioned Scott Hussey. He was competing on the tour, at the pro level.
Wakeboarder, yeah.
I've always had a problem with, and this is not anything against Scott Hussey necessarily, but what I'm saying is when you travel the world and you meet all these different people, everybody knows a pro wakeboarder. Oh yeah, I know a pro. I'm like, oh, who is he? who do you know? And they're like,
some obscure name.
Some name that I've never heard of. I'm like, oh, dang, I should know who that is. And I probably had that conversation 50 times, 100 times, maybe. It's like, so the whole term wakeboard pro, and then the reality is anybody can sign up and for the pro category, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't until a couple of years, years well into the pro tour that they would have a cutoff. You had to qualify for the tour because there were so many people that wanted to do it, which was a great problem to have. But my first pro event, I mean, I came in last out of like 60 something people. That was up in,
impressive.
It was awful, but I remember it. And actually then Scott Hussey came, that the clinic was the next day. So I went from like last place, nervous as hell. Nobody talked to me except for Freddie Cougar. Freddie Cougar was
really,
this is when Freddie was showing the world that he can do anything and he's an absolute beast. But he was competing on the pro tour and making finals and stuff. The guy's such a freak. And I think it was very interesting because I didn't know him very well, but he was the one that came up and talked to me. Funny story though, my sister was there. We had bagels and she was like, hey, there's Sean Murray, right? I'm like, yeah, I know exactly where he's standing. Yeah. And she's like, see if he wants a bagel. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Which is so funny because knowing Sean now, he would have been like, oh man, that's super cool.
Sweet, thanks so much.
Yeah. But,
So on top of that pro thing, so what does it mean to be a pro?
To me personally, I think it's like making a living doing the sport, and that's your sole job. That's probably the farthest end of the spectrum. And making a living can be anything from like, paying your rent, and you don't have to work somewhere else to make rent. I guess that's the picture I have in my head. And then going through all those stages, when I was getting paid, I considered myself like I was on the factory team and I was getting paid. I didn't call myself a pro wakeboarder until till Liquid Force really like stepped up my contract and were like, we're putting your face on banners at Surf Expo and things like that. I was like, oh, okay. Like this is, to me, that meant like,
now it makes sense to call myself or be referred to as
I was more comfortable calling myself that.
Okay. Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say it as if what you're bringing in is more than what you're spending to live. Mm-hmm. I feel like a pretty middle of the ground way to put it.
Yes.
Because that's your job. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're splitting a house with 5 people and your rent's super low, hey, whatever. This is what you're doing, your sole form of income. So I'm just curious on your thoughts on that. So let's talk moving to Florida. So is this after that last summer after college?
Yep.
That's when you decided to move down in the fall?
Yeah. So my buddy Craig, who was the inverted wakeboard and water ski school, still running today. So I just want to put the plug out there. Yeah. Screw Lake now. It was on Loon Lake, but north of Lake George. So check it out if you're listening.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the description.
Yeah. He was just an amazing dude, and he was like, "Hey, I know somebody that knows PJ Marks at the wakeboard camp, and I'm heading down to Surf Expo." I didn't really even know what Surf Expo was, but he was like, "Hey, I worked at his shop for a bit, like when I wasn't coaching, and he was like, you should come down." And I'm kind of like, yeah, I should, but I don't know if I'm going to get much out of it because, I'm just going to be like walking around as like a shop guy. I'm not making any purchases, I'm not filling POs or anything. But of course I wanted to be around it. And my dad he was like, yeah, I'll buy you this flight because I think it's super important for you. And that was a big deal. Like, not that he couldn't afford it or anything like that, but my parents didn't do the things that are like over the top, like, oh, we're going to buy you a boat. You love this thing? We're going to do this. We're going to send you all the contests. Like every contest I entered was like the money that I had been earning at the marina to spend to go to that tournament. So that was a pivotal moment because, obviously being at Surf Expo and you're walking around, this is like when Danny Harf was the golden boy and everyone, I remember being like, oh my God, it's Danny. And I'm like, why am I looking up to this like teenager? You know, I'm a college graduate. And I'm like, this kid is so badass. They did a demo day on Lake Down on the Windermere chain. And I'm standing there with Craig and some of the other shop guys waiting for our turn to go out on the boat. And I see Keith Lyman's sister standing there. And I had met her because that family that had hosted Scott Hussey and had put those clinics on, they had met Keith through the local contest scene kind of after I had gone to New York. So I wasn't competing in New England anymore. So I was like, hey, I'm like, you're Keith's sister, right? She's like, yeah, what's going on? Like, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure this out. I think I'm going to try to move down here. I'm going to see if I can work at the wakeboard camp. She's like, well, we need someone to live in our house because I'm supposed to pull Keith every day and I can't drive for him. So it might be cool if you want to come down and wakeboard, if you could drive for him, you know? And so I was like Keith's driver, which was funny. Cause like the first time I saw him ride, I'm like, holy shit, this kid is so good. So unbelievably good. And we still joke about to this day, you know, at this point, I think when I met him, I was like 21, you know, thought I knew everything. But then there's this like punk little 15, 16-year-old kid with definite ADHD behavior, jumping around and, you know, and I always liked him, but I definitely, we always joke in the first few years, he's like, yeah, I was a little crazy. But yeah, so then, actually on that trip, I went out, we got a chance to go ride with PJ, out of the wakeboard camp. What we didn't realize was that there was a whole like Liquid Force thing going on out there. A bunch of the, you know, Liquid Force team and, well, not necessarily the team, but I think a bunch of reps at the time were out there. And PJ's like, oh yeah, I can break away for a little bit. And then he called one of his coaches at the time, Kurt Robertson, who became a really good friend over the years. He's like, yeah, all right, you want to kind of show me your stuff? All right, fine, we'll go out. And so I'm riding, and you know, I did a Pete Rose. I could do a Pete Rose at that time, and I fell in the first one, and they were like trying to coach me on it, and I was like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, I could do this. And then I landed the next one, but like I'd never spun off axis, and then I kind of learned it. Like, wow, it was basically like a tryout, you know, but I was like learning tricks during that. And so Kurt always joked about it, but PJ turned to Kurt during that and he was like, you're fired, by the way. But no, that was not the case. So he said, yeah, like I'll fit you in when I can. So that's really all I needed to say. Like, yeah, now there's a reason to come down. Yeah. So I packed up a small rusted out Chevy S10, tried to put a tarp over it, drove down from New York, come to the house that Keith and his sister and some other people lived in. And I had kind of mentioned that, like, look, you know, I'd spent my years in college, you know, sharing rooms.
Slumming it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to share a room. Like, I'm an adult now, right? I don't have any money, but I'm an adult. You know, I just said it like, I'm not going to share a room. And so I kept asking, like, did you guys figure it out? Like, he's like, yeah, no worries. It's all good. Yeah. Just come down. It's all good. So I drive down in November of 2000 and I go into the house and I'm trying to beat the sunlight so we can try to get a set that night. Like the first time I moved down, obviously that's like why I'm there. And, I walk into the house and he's like, yeah, you're right this way. Yep. And I was like, well, when I came to visit you guys, this was your room. He's like, yeah, no, it's all good. This is yours. I'm like, well, where are you staying? He's like, no, don't worry about it. It's all good. He said that's when he set the tent up in the backyard.
Okay, so that was a Patreon question from Jeff McKee. He was wondering, you kicked Keith Lyman out of the house, forced him to sleep in a tent in his own backyard, but that's not how it went, it sounds like.
No, not at all. He, as much as I thought that I was obsessed with wakeboarding, he was way more than I was. Like
anything to get a driver.
Anything. And yeah, but it was awesome. It was sort of the beginning of our friendship that, you know, I consider him a brother. Yeah, he's a good dude.
Okay. Yeah. What was your bag of tricks like when you moved down there? You said you had, landed a Pete Rose, but what else are you kind of, busting out some mute grabs, obviously, too, but.
No, well, it's funny. I couldn't land blind. So I had a whole thing about, I'd landed a chromo, but I landed it like, sort of handle pass. And then Pete Rose, I could land wrapped if I sort of screwed it up and ride away from it wrapped. But if you asked me to do a toe side 3 and land wrapped, there's no way. And then backside 180s, I was really, really bad at backside 180s. So I was just like basic invert guy. So big front flips and, all the railies and a couple spins. And I just learned to spin off axis. But yeah, I mean, it was like the Pete Rose was like the trick that, yeah.
What's the scene like? Are you just riding with Keith or?
Yep. I was only riding with Keith. His buddies would come through sometimes, but then once in a while, so I rode with Jeff and Billy McKee once, I think, but they were like to me big names at the time, so I was sort of like nervous when they came out. The wakeboard camp guys were cool because even before I really started working, so the next part of that story is once I moved down, they just didn't have any room for me at the wakeboard camp. So the first year that I moved down, I only worked like 4 or 5 days there, which was kind of a bummer. But just like anything, like I was like, fine, whatever I need to do. So I like worked at Disney, and then I worked a construction job and things like that, or installation job. I shouldn't say construction, but it was mostly just with Keith. But then, people that Keith would have met either on the road or through different photo shoots that he was doing. So like Leslie Kent came over to ride one time. And then probably the coolest moment was when Mark Kenny came through. So I was always convinced that Keith had like the biggest switchback mob into the flats of anybody, right? You've got like the Micker that had been doing it for years, massive. But then, Keith had a different gear, right? Like his springs and his intensity, longer rope, all this stuff. Wakes were bigger. And I was like, oh, dude, nobody goes bigger on a switchback mob than Keith. And then Mark Kenny came out, and I was like, oh, I might have to rethink that. But yeah, that was the start of a cool friendship with Mark, actually. So,
all right. Are you competing? I mean, what's your, I guess not your goal, but is your goal to get on the pro tour and win? I mean,
no. So yeah, that's what's funny is I was not riding. I was watching Keith go through this whole thing, and even like having photographers out, and I would just drive. I wouldn't. Part of it was like, he was young and probably didn't know that he should be like, oh, you should shoot Ben or whatever. But I would just kind of like, yeah, not that I was like Keith's driver only, but I just never thought I was any good because I'm watching Keith ride every day doing like all the stuff that he was doing. So I was like, I know I'm pretty good, but if that's what wakeboarding is, like I'm not there, So, and I never really like thrust myself into the spotlight. It's just not I don't know. I guess it's not a comfortable thing for me. But I did like the Fort Lauderdale Pro Tour stop, didn't do so hot. And, I would just do things that were local. I wasn't really traveling at that time. That would be 2001. And then, over time, you kind of just meet a few other people. And the wakeboard camp, actually, when I was plugged in over there, that's when some of those relationships would start. And then, and then that's how I ended up on the cover of Water Ski Magazine, which is like the first photo I ever got in a magazine was the cover of Water Ski Magazine.
Impressive. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I can explain the shot too, because I was wearing bright flowered board shorts and probably the blue Sean Murray vest. But PJ had so he has a plane that he would fly around, and the story was going to different kind of well-known water ski lakes and wakeboarding, and doing a kind of a water ski and wakeboard collaboration, kind of. It was a photo shoot for both. And I don't know if it was the first time that ever happened, but it was sort of something that was like, didn't happen often because skiers and wakeboarders didn't really hang out much, I guess.
Yeah.
Or
they didn't mesh.
Well, especially when wakeboarding started to take off, probably how wakeboarders felt about wake surfing. Wake surfing started to take off. They weren't jumping at the chance to hang out with all of the wake surfers. But yeah, so he had taken a couple of the coaches to different spots, and the mission was to get a cover shot at one of these lakes. But PJ was spreading the love. He had like Kyle Schmidt. I think Glenn had left, Glenn Fletcher. I think he had left already, but they had gone to one location, and then I think it was Chris Northrup and I went to this other location in South Carolina. I forget the name of it. But yeah, we're riding behind just whatever, but the water was really cool. And Doster was there, so it was a big deal to meet Doster. And yeah, then I get a call from Bill Doster that says, dude, you're not going to believe this. Like, you're going to be on the cover. And I'm like, what? Like, I was just hoping to show up in the article somewhere, or like get a little quarter page or something. But so funny, because then that summer I go back to New York and Charlie Patterson is coming through on his Mission to Ride tour. And he's like, oh yeah, like I saw that, or like whatever, like maybe my buddies had said it before I got there. And he's like, people work their whole careers to get that. And he was kind of like
a dig or a little bit?
Or he's not I mean, he wasn't being like mean about it, but he had said like that's like not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't know.
Look, I didn't beg anyone for it.
Yeah,
like, it just kind of happened.
I'm as surprised as you are. But yeah. Oh, we've moved past chronologically this point, but there was one of the big reasons why I felt like moving to Florida was a thing to do was when Keith Kipp came through upstate New York. So I had been with my upstate New York guys like Craig Kennedy, Tyler Eaton, Michael Fidzinski, like these guys that were like kind of the scene up in Lake Placid and, that area. And then Keith Kipp was coming through to be a guest judge. So that's actually where I landed my first Pete Rose was in a contest off the double up with Keith Kipp in the boat. So I had been trying it and had been getting pretty close, but never landed it. So it was like, we're going to do a pass down, pass back, and pass down, double up, pass back, double up. It's on Mirror Lake in downtown Lake Placid where no boats are allowed, but it's like they got a special thing to do this contest. And I was going to do a left double up first for like, a heel side, whatever. And then I was going to try the Pete Rose as like my last trick, just to like, I'll just try it. But he drove the right double up first. And I was like, oh, no, this isn't how it's supposed to go. And I was like, well, I have to do it. And so I just threw it, and landed it like as perfect as probably I could have ever done it, and just rode away like having no idea. Like that feeling, I just talked to somebody about this. I was talking to John Dreiling about this, like that feeling of landing something and you have to think about it for a second. Did it actually happen? Because right now it doesn't feel like I did anything.
Yeah.
Like the moments after. And especially something that you were like working towards in that venue, So I can imagine that Thomas.
I was literally about to say.
He's probably.
It's got to be a similar feeling he had.
Well, just look at his reaction when he was like, yeah, just the WTF moment after, right? So
absolutely.
But that was cool. That was really cool. So Keith had said, like, dude, like you should definitely move to Florida. I'm like, I'm not going to be good enough. Are you kidding me? And he's like, no, just do it. Like you can totally hang. And that's not, he's like, that's not even the reason why you should, but you will. And I'm like, all right. So that was a catalyst for me to have Keith Kipp say that.
Another like vote of confidence of, well, okay, maybe it sounds like something I should do.
Yeah. Coming from somebody that I watched in Daily Dose over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah. So you're in Florida. Competing isn't really something that you're focusing on. Is your journey trying to become a professional wakeboarder? Is that what you're trying to do to get paid to do it?
It's weird. It was sort of, it's always a part of it. I always have dreamt of making money off of wakeboarding, but it was more, at first it was if I could ever travel, I'd get my travel paid for, or somebody wanted me to go somewhere for wakeboarding. Of course I dreamt about being on the podium. Of course I dreamt about being in videos, but it was also like, what if, either I made enough money to do that and travel, or I can honestly say I didn't think I was ever going to be good enough that people would want to pay me to do it. And then, so I worked this like installation job where I was like installing key card locks in hotels that were being built. And my roommate at the time was doing that. And he was like, yeah, I think they're looking for more work. So I'd just drive around the Southeast, like installing these key card locks. But I made some decent money doing that because the coaching thing wasn't busy enough to pay the bills. And I saved up enough money to send myself to the Malibu Open in 2002. So that, I mean, I could go way into it. Maybe it's worth talking through.
I think it is. It sounds like it is.
So, barely had enough money to get myself out there. Well, obviously to enter. And then I had enough money for one hotel room on my own for the first night. But my plan was to figure out somebody that was going to be out there that I knew that I could ask to kick it with, or like, hey, I'll pay half or whatever. So Mark Henny was on his tear when he was like winning everything. He was in Switzerland and would win, come home, come back here, win something wherever, And because we had, met a few times, and I was doing some of the pro tour events that were like drivable, North Carolina or Fort Lauderdale or whatever. So we hung out a few times. And the funny part was whenever we were hanging out, it was the three of us. It was me, Keith, and Mark, and then sometimes Brian Francis too. But like we always felt like we weren't invited to the cool parties, or we weren't comfortable being there. So we were kind of like, we would just the three of us would hang out. And so fast forward to Sacramento for the Malibu Open. I bump into him after the first day, and I rode really well in the qualifying round. He didn't have to qualify, but he was just there, and he's like, I was like, hey, any chance I could, kick it in your room or whatever, like just a place to crash? And he's like, yeah, definitely. I'm like, yeah, I'll throw you half. He's like, don't worry about it. He's like, I've won so much money recently. Don't worry about it. I was like, kidding me? So then to make the story better, I get my stuff, people were out to dinner, having drinks, whatever. And then I come up to his room, knock on the door, like dragging my stuff up there. And there's a female in the room with him. Not in the throes of passion or anything in the moment, but just maybe going there. And he basically like semi kicked her out of the room. I'm like, dude, no. And he's like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm like, holy shit. Then we're talking through just chatting. He's like, his words were, you and I are going to win this thing. And I said, well, you are. I mean, I think, I had sniffed the podium in Detroit the week before. Yeah. So that was my first podium, or first, sniff the podium. No, finals, I should say. I didn't sniff the podium. The finals. I made the finals in the Detroit tour stop, which was the only timed free ride that the tour ever did. So you had like a certain amount of time, just go out there and do what you want to do. And it's kind of funny because it's like, that totally was more my style of riding.
That's my format.
Yeah, right. Like not cram in as many tricks as you can and, whatever. So I had a little bit of confidence. So like, holy crap, I made the finals. And I came in 10th. I came in last in the finals, but it's all right. So then we're out there, right? And yeah, he said, you and I are going to win this thing. Like, whatever. Like that, I'll see you on the podium shortly. But, and then fast forward through the next couple rounds, I find myself in the finals again. I rode kind of out of my mind for myself and ended up a second. And he literally tapped me on the podium and was like, dude, told you. And I'm like, that was the coolest thing. So that after that, tragically that he passed away a few weeks after that. And I had gone back to New York. It was before I started spending my summers in Florida, but that was news that just the type of news that didn't make any sense. It's not, and then for his like real close friends, I can't imagine how hard that was, but he left a huge imprint on Keith and I, and like super generous, just an awesome dude, incredible rider. I don't think people actually realize how good he was. And then then for me, I guess that opened up a lot of doors to having more conversations with sponsors, and when Liquid Force started to offer me like travel contracts, basically just saying like, look, you go to a contest, we'll pay you X just to cover your costs. So that was sort of the start of that.
Turning point, sounds like very much so.
Yeah.
That podium.
Absolutely.
Starting with that night. So again, you're talking about picking up some sponsors. So this is Malibu Open was 2002. Is it pretty shortly thereafter that Liquid Force kind of comes in, and is there other brands involved as well, or?
There was a small clothing brand called Synthetic. These guys were super cool. CM Slocum, actually. So he's a super rad dude, been in the industry for a while, reps a lot of brands. He and his buddies had started this little clothing brand, and there was a couple of us that were like rocking their gear. That was just on flows. There's no money there. But no, then Liquid Force was the first one to kind of come along and say, look, like we'll cover like four contests that you want to do this year, because we want to, you're riding our stuff and we want to support you and see where it goes. So, that would have been that following year. Trying to think of when the other stuff came along, but I didn't pick up a boat sponsor till like take that back. I rode for Session Boats for a little bit. So Session was Mike Anderson and crazy. Mike Anderson works out at the gym that I work out at, so I still get to talk to him. I make fun of him because I'm like, I can't believe you thought it was a good idea to sponsor the cassette crew. So he gave the whole cassette crew a boat. And then I was kind of like also sponsored, but I lived with Aaron Reed. So it was like, you guys can split that boat or something like that. But unfortunately the boat didn't work very often. And then when it did, if the cassette guys were using it, it was, more for partying than anything else, which was awesome. It was awesome to be a part of that whole thing. That, again, I feel like I'm rambling, but those cassette years. So Keith and I, he really started to make it. Like he was picking up sponsors. He's getting, signature pro models and things like that. And I'm just kind of like, right on, dude, but the wakeboard camp thing was really, a path for me to like, pay my rent and that kind of stuff. And then just ride as often as possible. So Keith and I parted ways in terms of like, there's a year or two that we weren't as close of friends. I think he was a young kid kind of making it and traveling around the world and getting a lot of attention. And, it's just interesting because then years later he came back and said, dude, I feel like you and I, weren't on the same page for a while. And, I was a little jealous of him. I can say that, but because it was cool. Like the amount of attention he was getting. He's on the cover of Wakeboarding magazine. And, so then we reconnected years later. Then, like I said, but the wakeboard camp, well, I can move on to another one of my absolute closest friends, Aaron Reed. So the first time I met Aaron Reed, it just didn't go well.
I do want to hear this story. Yeah.
Yeah. So Aaron, if you know Aaron Reed, you know that dude is like, passionate, animated, and all of these amazing things. But at that time, he and I just weren't kind of like on the same page about stuff. Like I was always kind of this like quieter, not trying to get the spotlight. Whereas like every conversation when Aaron was around is always about Aaron and being funny and all this stuff. And he had his crew and I'm kind of the new guy and he kind of didn't really like pay any attention to me and that kind of stuff. And it's okay. Like, cause Kyle Schmidt was paying attention to me and I was like, idolized Kyle Schmidt, best coach in the world, by the way. I think he's done more for wakeboarding than most people think. And I don't know. Just want to put that out there.
Okay.
Funny part was this girl that I was dating at the time from up north came down to visit. And then all of a sudden he's like wanting to talk to me, and like And I was like, dude.
Okay.
And he's like introducing himself to her, and he introduces himself to me. He's like, "What's up, man? I'm Aaron." I go, "I know, dude. We've met 6 times." And he's like, "Whoa, okay, all right." And I'm like, "No," but like at this point, I'm like, "Okay, this is a little ridiculous." And we've talked through this. He doesn't love this story, and I know why. And I'm sorry, Aaron. You know how much I love you, but it was an interesting time. And then over the years, then we became extremely close. And then the joke was we lived together almost long enough to be common law marriage. But he's like, he's absolutely like one of the most amazing people. And he's any of the negativity that I would have referenced in that, he's like completely refocused into being like this unbelievable dad and ultra marathon runner. Dude runs like 50, 60-mile races.
I had no idea. Wow.
He doesn't talk about it much to like outwardly or on social or whatever, but he's unbelievable. So it's been cool to see that whole progression, but he had a lot to do with my like validation, I guess you could say, in the sport. He was tight with the cassette crew and filming for pre-pop with the Alliance guys and Chase and Staker coming out. And then he, as we were out there, he's like, "Dude, you should film Ben and watch him ride or whatever." And then Chase was like, "Holy shit, this kid's good," or whatever. And Aaron, and being like accepted by the cassette guys, like there wasn't a whole lot of wakeboarders that were, and it was just because Aaron and I were friends. And I think Thomas appreciated that I wasn't just some like gymnast, and I wasn't a gymnast behind the boat, not because I thought it was uncool. It was because I just wasn't capable of doing all the crazy stuff. So I just gravitated towards what I could do. So that was a big moment, just to have the cassette crew. Like I was the only wakeboarder in Sfumato, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
I did not know that.
It's either towards the end or it's a bonus section or something, but it's the Texas Gap. So it was when Aaron did that. I mean, that was like a groundbreaking drop, and I hit it a few times on a wakeboard, and Mike Eisler got a sequence. So that was like my first sequence in a magazine. I think I was just doing a switch 180 over it. And so it was like, whoa, cool. But I was also like, yeah. And then my buddy like ollied it on a wake skate.
Yeah, I'm strapped in, guys.
Yeah. I was like, it's cool because you haven't seen what's coming out. So I got a little bit of love for that, which is cool.
So as it's progressing, it sounds like you're making some more connections. You're riding with some different people, getting a little bit of attention video-wise, photo-wise, signing with Liquid Force, and they say, hey, we can pay, for you to go 4 contests this year. Maybe it ramps up. But are the contests something that you're really finding a jive with, I guess? Because you got second. That's awesome. But after that, you have any other moments that you kind of have a resurgence?
No. So my stint in contest lasted 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks, or I don't know if it was back-to-back weeks, but it was basically Detroit, Sacramento. I think the best I had ever done in the traditional style contest was, I think I made semis. I had never made another final, but the biggest turning point, I was now at a point with Liquid Force where they're sending me to places and paying me a little more. And that's when I would have considered I was now a pro wakeboarder. But I was in Singapore doing a thing with Liquid Force. Kyle Schmidt and I were over there. And I get back, and I'm just all, time-wise, jet lagged, like just all over the place. And this was the year that you had to qualify. You had to be top 40 to make it, to be invited to the rest of the tour. So there's all these people going for it. I want to say, 80 plus. And the running order wasn't set until the morning of. So you didn't know when you were supposed to ride. So I'm out in Claremont. I'm like, I don't know what time I'm going to ride, or maybe it came out late that night or something like that. But anyway, I'm all over the place. Couldn't sleep. Could finally fall into a deep sleep. That's what it was. I did know I was in like the 6th round or something, 6th heat, but I didn't know when it was going to be. And I guessed it would probably be about this time. they were way ahead of schedule. So
Wakeboarders ahead of schedule. I mean, come on.
yeah. Chris Bischoff, man, he's
Runs
running a tight ship.
Yeah.
And in such that then affected Chris Bischoff running such a tight ship. So Lyman calls me and he's like, dude, hurry up, get here. And I'm not, I got from Claremont to OWC like way faster than you're supposed to. Cause I was like, I'm going to miss my ride. And if I miss my ride, I'm not riding on the tour for the whole year. I pull up, drive through everything, leave my truck, kind of like blocking some cars, grab my board, run down. And the rider that was supposed to be after me was getting swung into the dock. And I remember just like running up. I'm like, holy shit. Like, all right, I'm here. Colin Harrington was in my heat. And he was like, dude, let him ride. He didn't see he has no advantage here. In fact, he has less of an advantage because he probably would have seen at least one or two people ride before him. And Bish is like, sorry, dude, can't do it. I'm like, listen, it's just this qualifying. Like, I don't even know what these other guys did. I don't know what I have to do. Like, I just got here. Like, he's like, I can't do it. Like, we can't put people out of order. And I was like, that's kind of BS because I saw you put Parks in, or you like held up a contest and waited until Parks got there.
I was going to say, there's no way that this hasn't at least happened one other time with a big name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And in all credit, like, why would he waste that time on me? Like, semi no name, like, whatever. But I love Bish to death. I get it. But that moment sort of decided for me that contests weren't my path. Like, I didn't know I would have qualified anyway, but then I was getting a lot more love from Alliance. Not that I pit one against the other between wakeboarding and Alliance, but Alliance gravitated towards what I was doing. And really, had they not, sort of like, bees go to where the honey is. It was sort of like, yeah, tour screwed me over. Like, they don't even want me on their tour or whatever, do I even want to ride for that? And then, things really ramped up, like from that point on for me with sponsors and the Quicksilver deals and, Fuel TV and all that stuff. Like, so that was a big turning point. The fact that I missed my ride.
I think that's really interesting because it's like a weird blessing in disguise type moment where who knows if you would have, he would have let you ride or you would have got there on time. Yeah. You would have qualified maybe, or maybe not qualified. And then you would have been like, man, what the hell's going on?
Yeah. No, I've had a few of those moments where it feels like one of the worst things that could possibly happen. And then you look back and you're like, I'm really glad. I just was talking about that when I blew my knee out. It felt like the worst timing ever because Don Wallace had actually said that you're now like on the team, like you're getting a full contract and all that. And I blew my knee out a couple months after that. And I was so devastated because it felt like, well, they were taking a chance on me and I just kind of blew it. But he was so cool about it. He said, we were at the Spy Bar. I totally remember this. And I said, I feel like I'm just going to get dropped. And he's like, if we dropped everybody that got injured, we'd have no team, and he's like, no way, man. Like, so that was, that's when like the filming for Relentless was going on. And I missed a lot of the time to film for Relentless. That's why the whole section was about like me coming back. There's some clips of me just prior to blowing my knee out. And then everything obviously with the brace after was. And
they have like rehab clips in there too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So we'll talk about some video parts in a second, but I think this is a great time to bust out the LF and Wheel of Questions presented by Liquid Force. Talking about Don and injuries and stuff. So you want to go ahead and grab that down here and pull it because it might fall off if we try to spin that on there.
Okay.
The LF and Wheel of Questions.
Okay, let's go.
So we got a bunch of stuff on here. We were talking earlier about I added a couple of glasses of milk chug. So we got, I don't know if this is a 33% chance or it's around a 30% chance you're going to have to chug a glass of milk. But other than that, we got some other stuff on there and whatever it lands on, we'll go ahead and explain. So
all right, so
go ahead and
give it a rip.
Give it a rip. Yeah.
Oh, that was a weak.
Do you want to spin it again?
Yeah.
Okay, so give it a big spin.
Yeah.
There we go. That's more like it. Chug a glass of milk. That's what I like to see.
I should have got the first one.
So it's behind you in that cooler. Do you see that right there on that shelf? That Bud Diesel, yeah. You can probably just on the top there, that guy. Boom. There you go.
I don't know, man.
I'll do one with you. There should be another one in there. I'll do one with you.
Oh wait. Oh, I just learned this about you, that you're a chugger.
Well,
I am very much not.
Well, I'm a big fan of milk. I wouldn't say I chug milk
that too
often, but
yeah, I learned that about you too.
Should we do the same time? I think we do one and the other.
You can. I'll just start because it's going to take a while.
Okay, you go.
All right.
Yeah, and I'll fill the air so that way we don't have dead air. So this is the first ever glass of milk chug. So if you're listening, on Spotify or Apple, you should probably tune in for at least this moment because look at that, halfway down already.
I thought you were supposed to finish it all at once.
That's the idea. It is cold though, so I'll say that it is a cold glass of milk. It'd be probably pretty gross if it was warm. Microwave glass of milk. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and tap in here and
Please do.
see how much I can get down here. Oh, that wasn't great. I mean, it tastes great, but all right. Did you finish it? Let's go. And just like that, 300 calories and 16 grams of protein. So that's great.
I can honestly say that's the first milk I've had in 10 years, maybe. I'm not a milk drinker. So
Really? Okay. Wow.
Yeah, right on.
That's a long time. That's a big milk drought.
Yeah, I mean, nothing against it, really. I'm just usually...
I mean, are you an alternative milk guy or just typically straight up water? Because there's a lot of people that are, almond or oat milk or stuff like that.
No, just water.
Okay.
Water and coffee.
Keep it simple. I like it. Yeah. All right. That was the LF and Wheeler question. So I'll probably put that.
All right.
Go and put that back up there. Thanks to Liquid Force.
Yeah, thanks, Don, for helping make me do that.
I'll clip that and send it to him.
Yeah.
So before we dive into the movie, or I guess we can talk, you're kind of leading into Relentless and your knee injury there. So quickly run through the knee injury, how it happened. You touched on it a little bit, but what happened there?
Yeah, so we're filming. Oh, no, sorry. It was a photo shoot. Josh Letchworth. Oh, no. It was Joey Maddock. Joey Maddock was out shooting at the camp. The photographers would come out from time to time. It was such a great place to shoot because we had so many boats, so many people to drive. And it was either one of the coaches that they were shooting or they would bring somebody out. So we just had a constant kind of just carousel of photo shoots going on out there, which was cool. Sorry, the milk's coming back up.
So we don't have a reversal of fortune here.
Right. I was riding and hit a big double up and landed just in the weird spot, in the trough kind of, and just felt my knee slide and clack together. And ironically, there's an orthopedic trauma surgeon in the boat as a camper. We just had all kinds of different students come through and just happened to have an orthopedic trauma surgeon. So he did the check right away. And I just remember him going and just shaking his head. I knew that was bad. I did ACL, MCL, and then had tons of bone bruising because my knees, just the bones clacked together so hard. So that was the injury. But I, like I said, it was probably one of the best things that happened to me. I completely, just changed my view of wakeboarding, I guess, and what I was going to do with it. So, there's a couple of months there. It was sort of depressing before surgery, but I didn't have a beer for 7 or 8 months. Just during, therapy, I was I just want to come back as strong as I possibly could. I was in the gym all the time. And then I took it slow because there was a time where it felt like how quickly you could come back from your knee was another thing to compete over. There were comments made of oh, how long? Oh, I was riding no brace after 4 months, or was doing this 5. I was hitting double ups at 5 months, and I remember being I did study a little bit of exercise science in college. I'm not by no means a doctor or anything, but like to me, I'm like, that's not really how like capillaries work. Like they're, it's not, you're putting I had a cadaver tendon. So I'm like, I have a foreign body in my body and I'm going to go hit a double up. Like it just doesn't make any sense. So I did take my time. But there was the finish line of like, if I want to be in Relentless, like I needed to get some clips. So, yeah, but that, I mean, to me, some of my best wakeboarding was like coming out of knee surgery.
So you're talking Relentless. I believe, so I went back and watched most of your video parts, starting with Relentless, which is 2004.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but if you started there, you missed Sean Kilgis's films. So I was in My Side.
Oh, no, I did not see that one.
Yeah. So Kilgis, so yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, that's a good fact check. I didn't go back pre-2004. It's tough on the internet these days. I don't have the physical DVDs, so it's...
That one would be tough
or
to find,
VHS, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm talking way back then. But.
Yeah, definitely VHS. But yeah, I was in My Side, and I think that was it.
What year was that?
That would have been, I guess, like 2002, 2003. Yeah, I think we were filming in 2002.
Okay.
I think it was probably released in 2003. That's my guess. But.
All right, I'll have to go back and watch that one. See, any notable tricks from that movie that you had? You remember?
I can't. I might have done a heel 7, which would have been hard for me. But no, nothing like I'm super proud of.
Okay, all right.
But I was so unbelievably pumped to be in a movie.
Yeah, being a full movie.
So cool. Yeah,
especially with how premieres were back then. I'm sure it was a huge deal. Relentless, 2004. I believe you grabbed every trick.
I hope so.
I'm okay. I believe you did. But I watched your Pete Rose, and I think specifically this Pete Rose I watch in this movie. It's different than Pete Roses are now. Much different. B, there's almost like you have a delay, or it's a blind landing, right, on Pete Rose, but it's like a different kind of blind landing, how you did him, and I'm sure other people's did as well, where it's full commitment because right before you hit the water, you're almost at like 90 degrees. You're bored.
Well, yeah, it's funny you say that because that particular Pete Rose, it was not a good one. I didn't like that one.
Why is that?
Because if I would I would get hung up on it. I would because what you're saying with the delay, I would do that on purpose because I loaded the line really hard, probably a lot harder than I think a lot of other people do. But I used to try to bounce off the line tension to then come back into the landing.
Okay.
So I always visualized like taking the nose of the board and cutting it so that as I was taking off, it was going 180 degrees the opposite direction of the boat. Whereas, I think the other style of Pete Rose, you could say, is like you're throwing it, maybe the nose of the board up and over the top, and then basically getting into a position where you're now into like a switch roll to blind position. But for me, it's just the way I learned it and the way I got comfortable with it. So when it went well, I will say that I liked the way it looked, but I love the way it felt because there was a fluidity to it. But the one in Relentless was not my best.
Okay, I think I have your best, and I think it's in the truth, but we can talk about that in a minute.
That one's okay. Yeah.
That slow-mo Pete Rose is okay.
Yeah, that one's better. That
might be one of the best Pete Roses ever done. You grabbed for so long.
Well, it was also in like 100 or 240 frames.
But if you watch where you take off and then you grab, and then if you watch, it was a split second before your board hit the water, you're still grabbing the darn thing.
It's funny.
I'll put that clip in.
No, yeah, I love that clip because it was very, very cool. Just the way Justin Stevens shot it. That dude's a genius. I like the one that I did in, which one? Why can't I think? Oh, in Drive, in Kilgis's Drive. That one I liked better. That was one of the ones because I was kind of hard on myself in terms of like if I liked the trick or not, or if I liked the way I did it. But that was one I can say I liked it.
All right.
And it's not like I didn't like the one in the truth.
I know. Well,
either,
you're gonna have a
but
favorite, so it's
Yeah.
that's
the one in
understandable.
Drive was my favorite.
That's fair. But in Relentless, I think this was your second to last trick before. I think your last trick was an off-axis back 5, but your second to last trick was a Chromob or an Ole Toe 7. Which one was it?
If I'm being honest, this day and age, I'd say it's just a flattened out Chromob. But the way I learned it was, I think there's two different ways, right? You learn a scarecrow, and then you learn to take it to blind, right? Or, take it to blind, like finish the 360. The way I learned Ole spins or flatter spins, overhead, whatever you want to call them. So again, living with Lyman, he was doing them all the time. And he was so good at keeping him like really, really flat. The board would stay below his head. And to me, I'm like, that looks so badass. I would always try to do it, but I would just go straight into a scarecrow and go over the top. And I just never worked out. So I started to do switch toe side, front side off axis 3s, like late. So you kind of, trip yourself in like you're going to do a switch toe side off axis 5.
You kind of fall into the landing.
Yeah, and you just leave your head forward, just let the board drift behind you, and then, drop into a blind landing. And I could do that. I could only do that switch toe side. I couldn't do it regular. And so this is kind of one of those things where like a mistake turns into something that you're like, oh, actually, that's something to follow. So if I kind of cooked it a little bit too hard to bail out, I'd whip the handle over my head. And that was the feeling I had, where it was like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to like get that board back down under me. So to save it, just whip it over my head. And finish the 5 or whatever it was. And when you learn to do it and you get the rhythm down, it flows naturally into continuing the spin, right? So I'll say that I would do switch Chromobes. I'd grab it like switch melon or whatever. But when you like tripped into that position, grab mute, and waited and left your head forward, and it flattened out. You know what I'm saying? Like rather than looking it over, that to me flattened it out. So I will say it's a distinction. I wouldn't say if somebody went and did that, like you just did it's just a Chromobe, because it's way different. Like you do the trick differently.
For sure.
Is it I guess I would call them Ole 7s just because that's what had already been called. It had already been called that.
In a sense, that's what a Chromobe is, though. It's like an Ole 7 with an invert, right?
Well, I mean, it's
you're spinning 720. You're bored.
Yeah, right. I mean, by today's standards, where how corked you are doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I think back then we didn't really know what to call it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Keith was calling them like misty flips and stuff like that because they were like, well, that's what it looks like in snowboarding.
Yeah.
So like I'm not doing a straight backflip or whatever. I'm looking around the side. So
it's interesting because it's you have Chromobes are one of the a signature trick in wakeboarding for sure. Tangent blinds another one you can think of, but it's so funny and cool how people do it so differently. Mm-hmm. That one sticks out so much to me, like you say, Keith's as well. But like it's just so different how some people do these different tricks.
Yeah, and that was I stopped doing Chromobes the other way, or switch Chromobes. And I used to be able to do them regular, but then I got hurt on one and stuck my arm through the handle. Didn't want to do it ever again. But that trick just always felt so good. That's why I did it all the time, just like a Pete Rose. And I felt like I, at times, was just like had a little tiny bag of tricks that I was just doing over and over again, but I just really liked them. I would look forward to go riding to go do that. Like, it wasn't like, well, what else can I do to win a contest? It was like I wanted to just get out there and do another Pete Rose.
I think that's an interesting point because I think some people get hung up on the getting obsessed with the level of progression, even though some of these things feel well. And there's nothing wrong with having a trick that feels well, making it look good and doing it a lot.
Well, and I would argue that there's still an element of progression in that path. Like, obviously there's this smack in the face type of progression. Like you added a whole nother flip to this or a whole nother 180 or whatever. But, I think the way that I would approach even like spinning. I was actually really, really bad at spinning when I first moved to Florida. I couldn't land blind, couldn't, all this kind of stuff. But I started to focus on it, and then I landed a couple sevens, and I was super excited about that. But my first thought was not, how can I take this to 9? It was, okay, how can I like play with this and make it look good and do whatever? So then first would be just to grab it, just put a grab on it. Could I touch the board and finish the trick? Then it was like, well, could I grab it longer? Where else could I grab it? Or can I grab it and then poke it and then do it? That was always my train of thought, especially as long as it felt good too, like.
Well, otherwise, why are you doing the damn thing? Like, if it doesn't feel good, doesn't look good. I mean, personally, I don't know. It doesn't really get me going. So I want to talk about grabbing, poking, and tweaking in a little bit, but Butter Effect, 2005. So this is at the beginning of the podcast, you touched on the Red Sox hat.
Yeah.
How tight was that thing?
It wasn't bad. If you're just wearing it backwards, it doesn't fly off.
Really?
Yeah. It wasn't like I can specifically remember that felt like it might fly off, but it didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would assume that even if it's backwards and you turn your head a little bit or you're upside down, something happens. Okay.
I was only going 10 miles an hour the whole time. So no.
You got a 40-foot rope, 10 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Okay. I was assuming that was cutting off some circulation to the dome, but apparently
that's how I lost all my hair. Yeah.
Okay. The Truth, 2006. So we're kind of running back to back here. You're stacking some video parts, building the resume. So this is where it specifically stuck out to me when you were talking about grabbing, poking, and tweaking. I was watching this video back, and you can watch a lot of riders ride, and they grab the board, and they don't poke it, they don't tweak it. Like you put your hand on it, you wrap your fingers around it, you do the trick, and then you let go, and that's kind of it. But there were so many tricks in this specific part where you grab it, and then a leg sticks or your body twists, and it's almost a 2-part motion.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you were kind of already touching on it, but it's an important part of your riding.
Yeah. I mean, again, at this point, I'm getting paid to do this sport. I have, not an obligation, but a definite drive to continue to stand out, not to fade away, to be like, oh yeah, that guy, I remember that guy. And then he was gone. Like I was like kind of deathly afraid of that. Going from kind of getting those tricks and getting them on film, it wasn't like by the next time I was filming, I had a whole bunch of new tricks and a whole bunch of ender possibilities and like, oh, wait till they see what I learned in this last year. It wasn't like I ever, at that point, I wasn't just cracking up new tricks every week. It was more like, okay, these are the ones that I've got down solid. What else could I do with it? Like a heel side, backside 5, cool, let's grab it indie. All right, cool. What if I grabbed it and poked it and then went to 5? Like that's, to me, would be video worthy because, I did the same trick, in the last video. And you're always going to have your staples, right? And like, I'm never not going to have a Pete Rose in a section, but it was like, okay, let's see if we can take one of the flats or, that kind of stuff. So it was deliberate. But yeah, all driven by kind of a different type of progression than adding a whirly bird to something.
There was something else I noticed. I don't believe I saw one butt check or egregious hand drag in any of your tricks.
Okay. Yeah, good. I mean, thanks.
This seems like, to me though, we're talking about your style of riding. Is this a calculated decision you're making where you watch the clip back and you're like, okay, I kind of got a little bit back seat there, diaper butt, or
not necessarily. I don't know. I danced between whether I was a perfectionist or not. I definitely had my opinions about my own riding and just like, I didn't want it to look sloppy. I think I naturally had an ability to land in a stable manner that didn't look like I was falling off of a building, and the only reason I say that is just because some of my friends used to say like that they would see the way that I would land, and it looked like it didn't hurt, which I think was like a good compliment. Because
one of the highest compliments.
Right, because it's like you see some people land tricks, you're like, oof, But I don't know if that's just sort of where I naturally gravitated towards. I obviously didn't want it to hurt when I landed, so that part was deliberate. But yeah, I mean, I had my arguments with filmers that were putting together a section, and I was like, "No, you got to take that out." And this one friend of mine was like, "No, but look at the way I shot it," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's no good." And he's like, "No, but like it's glassy and it's this, the lighting's perfect," and I'm like. And he's like, "You landed it. It's fine." And,
a little back and forth.
Yeah. I wasn't to the level of like a raft to Rome. That's like, nothing's going to be seen unless I absolutely crush it. And he's going to work his butt off.
But there was a standard that you had for yourself.
Yeah. But I did have a standard. And then like photos wise, I definitely, I think maybe some of your background, I can relate to, in that I would see photos of myself in certain ads or whatever, and I'm like, why did they pick that one? Like, that one's awful. Like I remember seeing a different select from that day that was way better than that.
Yeah.
But that's the one that got picked, and I could never, So there's a part of our your background that I had learned about.
Go on. What are you getting at?
Well, it's interesting. So going from somebody that was a rider that would maybe, I don't know. I joke about this at times that like how all of a sudden I became the style police, which I wasn't trying to be for everybody else. I never would call people out and be like, "Oh, dude, grab Tindy. Like, that sucked." I definitely wasn't over the top of like, "Hey, everything is fine," because I was getting attention for doing what I was doing. So it wasn't like I was promoting the other bad stuff, but it was sort of like, right on. I'm doing it for my reasons. It wasn't necessarily to be legit or to make snowboarders like us. That always bothered me when people said, "Oh, if we ride the right way, then snowboarders are like us." And then this, and then that. And I'm like, yeah, but usually that comes down to like, it's people want more money flowing into the sport. It's like, but if we make it fun and attractive to people and it's like inviting, then we'll get more people doing the sport. There's two different camps there.
100%. Yeah.
I just happened to be connected to the one that was like, "Oh, well, that's legit." So that's what, certain camps wanted to represent, which is fine. Hold on, lost my train of thought there. Wait, tell it. Yeah. Okay. No, I remember. Yes. Okay. Well, yeah. So when I moved on to, I don't know, I'm fast forwarding here, but when I moved on to the media side of things, and now I'm at Wakeboarding Magazine, and, I think we had two separate dream teams in my opinion, during that time. And then as things would go, the magazines were obviously suffering, and, money wasn't flowing in, and we really had to try to just like do whatever we had to do to make it work. When your handle started coming around and calling people out, it was sort of like, "Hey, I understand why you're doing it. I get it." But at the same time, I'm in this position of like, we've got this legacy brand, in my opinion, that we're trying to keep afloat, that we're trying to put out as much boat content as we can, because that's where the money came from, and, all those kinds of things. So that was just an interesting like introduction.
Probably not a great first impression that I had on you, I would imagine.
Well, it wasn't necessarily one that I was like, "Hell yeah, dude." I was kind of like,
"This guy's great.
This guy.
I love this guy."
Well, but the whole anonymity aspect of it all, interesting enough, you may not know this, but we had the inverse happen. So I ran the wakeboarding handle for about a week a couple years ago. They just said, "Hey, we need to get some content up. Do you mind doing that?" And
please tell me you went through the DMs that we had.
I didn't go through them. No, because it was on the wakeboarding handle. I don't have access to that anymore.
Oh.
So they gave me access for like a week.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Hold on, who is this?" And I was like, "I'm a friend of the brand," because I had moved on at that point.
Yeah.
So it would have been within the last 3 years. And you had reached out a couple more times and said, No, but like, what's going on here? I'm like, nah, it's all good, man. You're like, all right, I like this. I like where this is going. We're going to have fun with this.
Oh,
so I don't know if you remember that interaction.
I do vividly remember that interaction.
So
yes.
yeah, that was me. But I intentionally wanted to stay anonymous, partly because I thought it would be fun.
Was it fun? It's a little fun.
Yeah, it was cool. And then now fast forward a couple years later, like, you know, they'll hire me to write a couple little articles here and there for some of the contests and stuff, and I'm happy to put my name on it.
Yeah.
But it was just a little interesting, little back and forth.
Yeah, ins and outs go. Yeah, I've messaged the Wakeboarding Mag account many times over the years.
I know.
And you know, honestly, it would be a good screen record because it's great banter. When you were in there, it was good banter. When Garrett was in there, it was good banter. I don't know who's in there now, but still some good banter. So, video parts, still talking about them. What's your personal favorite video section that you've
of
had?
myself?
Of yourself, yeah.
I think it's hard to say. Drive had my favorite trick in that, for various reasons, because it was a backside 5 into the flats, which I didn't grab. But I had been trying to do backside 5s into the flats for like, I want to say years, actually, like probably even like 2 years. I would give it a crack every now and again. And I never got worked on them. I would just pop the handle every time. So I kind of got to the point where I'm like, it's a lot of effort, and I'm probably going to pop the handle again. So I would try it sometimes, and other times just like let it go for a while. But we were filming for Drive. Jeff McKee and I were there with Randall Harris. It was the first time I got to be in the boat with him. So obviously completely blown away by this dude, you know, because he was gone for like most of the time that I had been around. So like I never really knew him. I didn't know he knew who I was until like the first time I met him. He's like, "Oh yeah, I've seen some of your stuff. It looks pretty cool." And I was like, "Oh, that's sick." But then I mean, obviously the Quicksilver thing, like we got him on the team and stuff. But the first time I got to be on the boat with him, I just was like super pumped and inspired, and I landed that trick with Randall in the boat, you know, on camera. So I was like, that was cool. That was a cool moment. Yeah.
King of the Flats. Maybe a little bit of energy coming from him.
Definitely. Yeah, I wanted to think I was cool.
But closest calls you've ever had filming?
Obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but the Defy.
I watched that back.
Mexico. I just showed somebody the other day. Basically almost got hit by a plane and a boat at the same time.
Yeah, run through that one a little bit.
Yeah, so we're filming for Defy. It was an honor to be asked to film like in Danny's video. You know, he's like just one of my all-time favorites. And obviously I have Kilgus filming. We go way back, and we're in Monterey, this cool lake. We're trying to get this shot of, a plane going one way and sort of timing up the trick so that it's this very fast panning shot. So you only get one crack at it every few minutes. So you got the chase boat out getting all the other clips. And I always thought it was Watson driving, but he said it wasn't him. So it had to have been Shane, because I think Danny was driving the towboat. But Kilgus is in this, like, it's like a Cessna, like a little small single engine piston plane, coming towards us. And you can see it in the distance, but the water was so glassy that the pilot, you lose, depth perception, right? I always thought that too in wakeboarding. I'd rather ride with a little bit of texture than like pure glass, because it messes with like where you are. You're looking at the sky when you're looking down, right? So that's what happened to him. He dragged his wheels in the water. Obviously lose airspeed, and Kilgus said that the pilot started panicking. And so Kilgus started panicking, but he's committed, right? He got the shot.
He's professional.
Yeah, he's like, hey, if I go down, I'm getting the shot. But what happened was the plane was so low that the chase boat, and they're on the same exact line, the chase boat and the guys that were in it, that were in a relatively dangerous spot. I was very, very calculated, and like I would never let a chase boat get totally in the no-no zone. But this particular shot was a method in the flats, and the towboat or the chase boat driver ducked down to make sure they didn't get their head cut off by this airplane that was coming at them, but goes right up to where had I landed back on my heels or popped the handle, they would completely would run me over. All the while not realizing that I would have been in the airplane's path had they not climbed enough. So that's why it's like I almost got hit by both at the same time. So yeah, that was.
And is this because I watched your kind of section in that back, and it's around the 20-minute mark for anyone who's watching Defy, but is that the shot that's in there?
Yeah. So the teaser actually shows it more.
Okay.
There was a teaser that came out because it shows me looking back at the chase boat that's like,
within arm's length.
Yeah. I mean, I could almost have touched the bow. The longer version of it is in the teaser, but it all happened so fast. Yeah. And then in the Mexico section, it is just kind of like and then moving on. But yeah, that was we almost all died.
Harry, yikes! I got a Patreon question from Garrett Cortez.
My guy.
Well, we're talking about videos and stuff, and it sounds like you keep up with wakeboarding, at least a little bit these days. So, if you were making a video today, which 5 riders are getting sections?
Well, I got to back up Sam Brown, Trent Stuckey. The park riding and stuff like that, I never really connected with as much. I didn't really have fun riding at the parks, and I wasn't any good at it. So I just kind of and I like being on a boat regardless of wakeboarding. So I just was always a boat guy. But what Trent does is he makes it look super fun.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. Let's see. This is gonna sound bad, but is it Pedro?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cable rider Pedro called us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like watching him a lot.
I think everybody likes watching him.
Yeah.
So that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Let's see. Mossy. I love that dude. I would watch that guy ride nonstop. And probably Tyler Hyam. Yes. Yeah. Well, can I do 6 then?
You can do 6. You can do 6.
Like Ulf or Kai or one of those guys.
That would be a solid movie.
Yeah.
You got some boat, you got some cable. That's okay. I like it. Any filmer you'd have involved or?
I'd get Justin Stevens on the phone real quick.
Call that guy up.
Yeah.
Speed dial. Okay.
Yeah. He had some magic. He knew how to tell the story. He knew how to not to take anything away from anybody else.
Yeah.
But I think Justin, had things not gone the direction they did with company wakeboards and stuff. I don't know. He's amazing.
He's talented.
Yeah.
Magician. Yeah. Let's talk Roadie, Rider of the Year, because this was 2005, correct?
Yes.
Why do you think you were chosen to win Rider of the Year in 2005?
So probably the question that most of the industry asked at the same time. In fact, I know they did.
We're going to get into it.
Yeah. No, as much of a surprise to me as it was to everybody else, I think. I think I just got recognized for taking a path that others weren't, maybe. Not to say I was blazing my own, but it was sort of I think it was just the way I approached riding. I think that's what they appreciated. I'll always say in my interview, I said I would have picked Danny Harf. And no, it was a really interesting thing because it changed everything for me. It was okay, that's wild that, I'm being chosen for this. Sort of that, doesn't sink in for a while. And then, then you feel the pressure after. 2006, I rode my butt off because I wanted to prove that it wasn't a fluke, so that's why I put a lot into the truth and, all that. I would have anyway. Right. But I think I had extra motivation, but I know that they fielded phone calls from riders and some heavy industry people that had said what are you guys doing? This is a joke. And I get it too. I mean, like I said, Danny Harf, he won the next year, right?
2006.
I think so, right?
Yeah.
I know he won soon thereafter. Could have won the first one. Could have won.
There was a span there where
any 10 of the years if he wanted to, but if they want to give it to him. But I think the coolest part of the story is Paul O'Brien was one of those people that was obviously didn't see it, like didn't get it. And if I were in Paul's shoes, I would have thought the same thing, especially because one of his riders should have, could have, would have, whatever. But the coolest thing is that he became a client of mine when I moved on to Wakeboarding Mag. I was always cool with him, but we became, not close by any means, but we had a great relationship. And then he had told me that I believe this is how the story went, that he had then called McCaffrey and those guys and said, look, I know what I said, but I see why now. And that was a couple of years after that happened. I was still riding, but that was like one of the biggest compliments I could have received is that even people that were like,
questioning or
yeah. And then it's fine too, to this day. I'm sure there's still people that are like, how, dude, never did a whirlybird, That's a fact. I've never landed a whirlybird or a KGB.
So why do you think you did win? What were some of the reasons?
Well, yeah, I just think it was unique in that I wasn't chasing the podiums or, in a matter of speaking, because I wasn't able to win those contests and then took that path of like, okay, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to find my own path and then progress my riding in maybe a more detailed manner, I think was probably what they liked, where it was like, not trying to add a 180 to everything, but trying to add a grab to everything or trying to grab and poke everything or whatever. That I think that's what they appreciated. And maybe just because others weren't doing that as much at the time,
Yeah.
So.
And that's more so kind of what Alliance was maybe not supporting or whatever, but that was more of their vision probably for the sport a little bit of,
surely.
Yeah, let's make it look really good. And this he's doing that.
Yeah, exactly. I think I filled a void that they felt like there was in the sport.
Yeah.
That's fair to say.
Okay. Back then, so you had two major mags, Wakeboarding Mag, Alliance. Is it true that, more or less you'd only get coverage in one of the mags? You wouldn't, there's not a year where you'd have a ton of photos run and covers on both.
So this is interesting, especially knowing what I know now about like the publishing world. When I started to get more love from Alliance, Wakeboarding Mag told me that they pulled a photo of me from their photo annual. And at the time, I was like, I'm just trying to make a living, man. Like if people want to run my stuff, like I'm not playing favorites here. These guys are taking me on trips. They're bringing me out on like Fuel TV stuff, like all this, obviously I'm going to go. Like, do you want me to tell them no? Because I'm not getting those calls from you guys. But I want my stuff to run if you do, so it's like this weird dance that you would do. And then, the smart move is just to try to, play all sides or whatever. I think Jeff McKee was a master at that, by the way. Just want to throw that out there. But he, there was tons of competition, fighting over ad dollars, and the ad dollars were significant back then. So it was, how many spreads was O'Neill going to run in your magazine? Well, they're, like don't run in there, like run a full schedule with us, and there's 12 issues a year, so there's like a lot of pages to fill. But because there were so many pages to fill, the books were so big, they needed content. It was hard for them to turn down content. So they used to, one of the phrases was, if you submitted words and images, it was probably going to run. It would be a back of the book thing. It'd be a regional thing. You're like, hey, this is going on in the Northeast or whatever. But for the heavy content, like they had pages to fill, features, like feature wells that were like deep because they wanted to maintain an ad to edit ratio that was like what we would all expect.
Yeah.
When I first started working at Bonnier, I heard this, he became CEO after, but the director of the whole, Florida group say like, hey, these are not the days where we've got 20 brands in line to get spreads up front in Wakeboarding Magazine. Like he used that as an example for all brands. They had like, 40, 50 titles at the time. But there was a day where they were turning people down for spreads because like we're done. We have no more room up front. Like, you know, we could put you something, get you spread towards the back or get you this or whatever. But like, then by the time I came along, it was like, you know, you're like, you want to run a spread? That's awesome. You know?
Yeah.
So, big change. But there was a you know, them versus us type of thing with,
I mean, it's just kind of
Alliance
business,
Wakeboarding.
right? I mean, they're competitors
Yeah.
in the space. So
yeah.
it's just a fascinating thing, kind of looking back at it now. Obviously, it's not really a thing anymore like it used to be, but in the heyday, it was, you know.
Yeah. Well, and then the thing was, if you got a cover, oh, here's an interesting little tidbit. I was obviously, you know, cuddled up with Alliance for the thing, you know, the awards that I got and the things that they were, you know, giving to me, but I only ever got one cover of Alliance. I had that interview and then Rider of the Year. They were pretty close, like within a year or so, I think. But I got 2 covers with Wakeboarding mag. I think Kevin Michael was a big reason for that.
Yep.
Yeah, my boy Kev. So when he was editor at the time, that first cover was like hey, Aaron Reed's shooting photos. He's getting really good at it. These guys are buddies. We had an idea for a cover. I went out and got it, and it was awesome. And that second one came within the next calendar year, actually, which didn't really happen much. In fact, I know from being on the other side that you intentionally tried to spread out some of that stuff, because if you just have the same guys on the cover all the time,
It gets stale. I mean, you want to spread the love for sure too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of spreading the love, but it's also like it just makes the sport look small when there's like, this is the guy, this is the cover guy. And it's like, oh, he's on the cover again. Well, there's nobody else doing this. So there's a little bit of that. Okay. But that second cover came about. It was just a shot from Joey Meddock out at Lake Powell. It just had a crazy cool background. The way he shot it, it's kind of like blurry, moody, you know. And Kev called me and he's like, dude, I think this is going on the cover. I'm like, what? So I had 2 covers of Wakeboarding and only one of Alliance, when I had way more content run through the Alliance channels than I did it from Wakeboarding. So I felt like I had to struggle to get love from Wakeboarding once I had kind of made it, I guess. It's weird.
And 2 covers though.
Yeah, right. Well, until that. So that's why I was like, oh, all right, that's sweet.
Well, here we are now. Yeah. I mean, back in the day, mid 2000s, who was your favorite rider to watch?
Mid 2000s.
Or I guess in your career, when you were riding.
Oh yeah.
In your career.
Well, Randall's a forever favorite. And then Danny Harf, you know, like just from all the various parts of his career. I just thought, you know, he was like the little golden boy that was winning contests. And then he just started inventing all these different tricks, and he did it well. And he was, I don't know, just a well-rounded dude and just a great guy too. So he's easy to root for.
Yeah. I was about to say that, easy to root for.
Also, I'll throw in Sean Watson too. Always loved old
Mr.
Waddy.
Smooth Operator.
Yeah. Always loved watching him ride.
Okay. So kind of maybe transitioning out a little bit of your riding career. When riding went from a passion when you were younger to a career, making a living, did your views change at all about wakeboarding? And how, if they did, how so?
Yeah, definitely. If you ask my friends Amber Wing and Haley Smith, that used to hear me yelling and screaming at myself, and some, you know, unsavory words that could be heard across the lake, I got to a point where I was so frustrated. It was because I wanted more. I wanted to improve. I definitely got the taste of like the spotlight and, you know, all the benefits that could come along with that. And then when you feel like either it's slipping away or it's just not burning as hot as it was, it's not fun. Like it, you know, I love the feeling of being on the water. But But, I think I was also at the age where what you had asked about before, about seeing your friends doing other things and advancing in their careers. A lot of my friends are getting married, starting families. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm losing sponsors, and there's tricks I can't do as well as I want. I'm not learning new tricks at the rate that I was. And it was definitely like start to look at like, what am I doing? And unfortunately it affected how I felt about wakeboarding, because when it's going well, it's the best possible thing. I'm getting paid to do my passion, and it's going up and to the right. It's all good. And then when it's like starts to flatten out, and there's so many of these guys that I see going through those points. Like I feel for, like I know how that feels, and it's not fun. You can fake it. You can be like, I just love it. I just love it. I just love it. But if it's like, you're not making the same money, that's obviously going to be a hit. There's some people that I do truly feel that they will ride until they can't, like, absolutely, but for me, I was so addicted to like the, next step, the progression, again, in the path that the way that I wanted,
grabbing, tweaking, poking. Yeah.
That, once I started to lose that, I was like, it's not fun. It's not fun anymore. So yeah, it's tough.
So speaking of kind of transitioning out of, the getting paid to do what other people pay to do, which is wakeboarding, how does that transition begin to, happen now that your views and attitudes towards wakeboarding is changing? You're not progressing like you used to. What are those next steps?
Well, right. Yeah. It's finding that next thing, but that becomes kind of a survival tactic. I had a mortgage. I had reasons why I needed a consistent paycheck. There was always coaching, but my attitude towards everything started to affect my coaching and some of my relationships there. I had some relationship problems with at various points with different girls I dated, and kind of where I wanted to be, and I wasn't there. So unfortunately I could have probably gone the route of, coaching and doing that more and making a good living. You can definitely do that. And, started a camp and made that successful. That's awesome. But I wanted to get away from it. From like the physical aspect of that's where my value is. I think that's a struggle. It's like your value is tied to what your body can do, and what it is doing. And it's like, I think I always, valued my, schoolwork or all these things too. And I was always like, I felt like a different person for a lot of years, because I felt like I wasn't using my brain
when you were riding,
when I was riding as much. And I was a college graduate that got plugged into a scene, a lot of people younger than me, but I did still feel like I tried to play a little bit of a role of what a pro wakeboarder was, kind of like I'm trying to play this like sexy indifference of like, yeah, whatever, like to borrow Jason Bateman's term from Smartless, the only other podcast that I listen to, by the way.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not a big podcast guy, but yeah, no. And then just certain decisions I made, I think didn't feel like me. And then, I think the catalyst of kind of returning to maybe more of I'm more of who I am was like meeting my now wife. And then, she's a very successful, she's a medical provider. And when we met, I was almost sponsorless. I still had a little bit of money coming in, but she was like, so what do you do? Yeah, no, I was like 30, 31. But then Sean Perry called me on a Tuesday afternoon and said, what's up? What's your plan? I'm like, I don't know, man, to be honest. I just finished playing golf. I don't know. I got a clinic coming up next week, so that's going to carry me through whatever. And he's like, told me about the opening at Wakeboarding Mag, and it was, 2011. And I said, no one else is calling me to offer me full-time jobs over the phone with benefits and a little bit of a career path, or at least a path. Right?
Yeah.
So that was that transition. And it went from being in a boat or playing golf and like doing whatever I wanted to sitting in a cubicle and making, I actually took a pay cut that year. I still had enough money coming in.
Who were you riding? Or was it Liquid Forest, obviously, at this time? Who else?
Liquid Forest was right at the very dripping end. I think there was still just a tiny bit of money coming in. Supra was still supporting and paying and had a boat. But, and then like the clinics and coaching was really kind of what was driving most of it at the time. But yeah, no, I share that story with a lot of guys that are having a tough time trying to figure out what their next step is. It's like, just like anything, it's never comfortable to like take a leap or take that next step or progress in whatever angle it is. But I mean, I didn't know how to act in an office. I didn't realize that I was the only one like bringing my breakfast and eating it at the desk. Everyone else had already eaten breakfast before they got to work. I'm like, and what I brought was like smelling up the place. Like I didn't
You're
know
that guy.
Yeah. Luckily I got to like blame it on being a wakeboarder. I'm just living the brand, but that move and, Sean Perry, calling me to, offer me the role. It was funny. He said, yeah, we wrote down a list of names, and we wrote your name down and then we, couldn't figure out any other names to write down. I was like, well, that's not a very good negotiation. He's like, I know, but, we really want you to do this. And it was great. That was the best thing I could have done.
Was that transition hard? Because you just mentioned playing golf, wakeboarding. I mean, kind of obviously you're on the downward part of your career. You're not bringing in new sponsors. Is that a tough adjustment to go and sit in a cubicle for hours and hours a day?
Yeah. Yeah. It was just like, I think I dove into it well. I think I, at least tried to focus on the things I wanted to learn and, and I could string a couple sentences together. I'd written articles in the past and that kind of stuff. So it wasn't like I didn't know how to produce some of that content, but it was like absolutely a major, major shift. Like the first day I took a picture of my now wife, we were just dating at the time, but the two of us were in the car and I'm like, first day at work. And I'm like 33 years old, basically. Right. Is that right? 2011. Yeah. 33 years old, like first day at work. But that was, like I said, the best thing I could have done. And then that path just grew at Bonnier and got to do some awesome stuff there. So
what did you start out doing when you first, first day? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So first few time, a little bit there.
Yeah. So I was hired as content editor. Sean Perry was being promoted to editor-in-chief and he needed to backfill the role. So yeah, I was just writing articles, posting, clips online or writing a quick hit about something. So it was just, interestingly enough, I was like scouring the web for web videos sometimes just to beat Alliance. So if we posted it first, we got more views, that was a lot of like what my marching orders were, and not even marching orders, but like, I was like, oh, I can do this and make a difference. And your job is to drive views and
get traffic, get page views.
Yeah. So, and then working on the magazines was fun. And then obviously Wake Awards and stuff, but it was cool because, I was definitely the subject matter expert and things would kind of like Sean Perry, get all credit. Like the dude made an unbelievable impact on the magazine and, making it legit and all this stuff, and legit in the best possible way that he could. Right. And then when he moved on and we picked up Garrett, that was like just an awesome thing too. Cause it was like another good friend that I got to work with that also felt the same way. So yeah, that was cool. So those years I was hired as content editor, only made it about a year and a half because there was a sales role that was opening up, and that's a whole story for another time. But so this guy was getting fired, and the chatter was like, hey, who do we think would be good? Like, we want someone that's like that knows the industry, can like relate to all the clients and everything like that. And I just was like, I could do it. And like, would you want to? I'm like, I don't know. Like being a salesman is like the last thing I ever thought I wanted to do. But I'm like, writing articles about wakeboarding doesn't seem like that's going to take me too far. So I took another leap and just was like, screw it. I'll be the sales guy. And then I was promoted to publisher a few years after that. So, yeah, again, just like a very uncomfortable move to make. But as with most things, it kind of had to happen to get me to a different point.
A couple points to talk on that. One, what do you think would have happened if you passed on this opportunity at Wakeboarding Mag?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. Cause it was, it was 2011, like the economy was still like really, really rough. So like leveraging my name within the sport, plus just the way I felt about everything, I didn't see a path there. And then it was sort of like, well, do I go back to school? Do I take out some student loans, or do I, start shelling out whatever I saved up from wakeboarding to go back to school? It was always something on my radar, just to like, get an MBA or do something, but I wasn't drawn enough to anything to say, this is what I'm going to do. So I think there can be magic in that, where you take an opportunity that you didn't necessarily, that wasn't on your game plan, that can work out well. But at the same time, there's tons of success from those people that are like, all right, as soon as I'm done wakeboarding, I'm going to be a pilot, or, that's awesome. I wish I had like
that next thing. It was
the next thing I want to do.
Determined. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I was older. I felt like, I'm almost my mid 30s. Like, I'd always said like, oh, I can do anything. I learn quick. That was sort of my thing. And over time it was like, damn, if I hadn't, and now the way I think about it, if I hadn't have made that move, I don't know. I don't know if I'd be happy and helping to support a family. And I mean, it happens. Maybe I would have started a business. I don't know, but
maybe you start a podcast.
Maybe, right?
And I wouldn't be here. So your sales in Bonnier, right? After this initial role,
Yep.
Content editor.
Yep.
What does that entail? So are you selling ads for Wakeboarding Mag and then all the other titles they have, or
no, just wakeboarding and water ski at first.
Okay.
So it was weird. It's weird selling to like people that you've known for, 10, 15 years, and having it's all cool. Yeah, it's all cool. And then it's not cool. And then you're kind of like, what the heck? I thought it was cool, and then, and I understand it's just a tough spot. So yeah, it was just focused on the water sports brands. Very difficult when I would go try to sell like the water ski world, which was also just completely like, consolidating and like not a whole lot of money there. And people just stopped making ski boats too. So it's like boat companies, and those weren't even that wasn't even my category. It's like, so I didn't even have boat companies. So I was just selling to board brands, some electronics, some of that stuff, accessories, whatever. But the real money was obviously with the boat companies, which the senior people had those accounts and they weren't going to let them go, which I understand why. But yeah, then when I was moved to publisher, it was cool. I got a bunch of good years in there, but was also in the driver's seat when when print shut down, which is heartbreaking. It's like the pages of the magazine were what like helped fuel my dream of wakeboarding, got me down to Florida, got me a job really in the sport, because if you're not showing up in the magazines, you don't have a job, So it's like, then I was hired at Wakeboarding Magazine, and then I'm running it, and we have to stop print. And we're all like, yeah, that was rough. It was really, really rough. But the folks at Bonnier like totally had my back, and had this conversation with Glenn Sandrich, who then was running the Florida group, and was like, do you have an interest in aviation? And I was like, I have an interest in staying employed. And he said, yeah, so there's a sales job open with Flying Magazine, which is like a total legacy brand. It's been around for over 100 years. It's like, it's pretty cool. So yeah, then I was an ad salesman for, account manager for Flying Magazine. And that is another move that was very uncomfortable because I did have a job offer in the industry that I was almost going to take. And then it didn't pan out.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll so to speak. Not by my choice either, but it's all good. Still friends. And yeah, I was just very uncomfortable in like breaking into this new thing. I didn't have any connections, and I'm talking to these pilots that no, I'm not a pilot. You can tell in the first few seconds of talking to somebody if they are a pilot or not. And it ended up going really well for like 2 years. I actually had some of my best years at Bonnier, selling for Flying Magazine. And that gave me the confidence to say, okay, well, yeah, if I could do this, I can.
Well, now I've finally broken out of anything water sports industry because even though going to the mag, it's still something a lot really well, even though it's a different job, but.
Yeah. And we were still pushing out stuff. I mean, we were still selling into wakeboarding, but it became maybe 20% of my job versus, 90% or 100%.
Yeah.
As it had been. But yeah, that was a big move too.
So when did the decline of print really begin?
Apparently before I got there. So, which in a way comforts me. Cause I had joked a few times with, like Matt Hickman, who was the one that like put me in that role, that like, dude, I got in the driver's seat of something that was so impactful in my life, and I drove it into the ground. Like that's, that would be one way to say it. I was kind of, maybe being a little dramatic about it, but he's like, man, we put you there because we were trying to save it, or we were trying to get as many years out of it as we could. We knew it was going away, but we figured we put you there, you could, try to help get some extra years out of it. And, I don't know if I did or not, but I'm just really glad they put me there. I got the experience and all that stuff. But, I mean, it was just every issue would get a little bit smaller, a little bit less revenue. Okay, well, now we've got our big boat buyer's guide issue or something. This one drives X amount of dollars. Well, it's, $50,000 less than last year. And it's just like, it was like the slow, painful death of, you got to play with frequency. Okay, now we'll go from 10 issues to 9, or, but then we'll add a special issue because that's what people want. They want to put their money in wake surfing. So we'd create a wake surfing issue. And then that, is sort of like, it was tough. I mean, it was just it's expensive. It's expensive to run ads, and then it's tough for print in such a small world where there's so few advertisers. That's the problem too. Like in the world I'm in now, we've, too boring for this podcast, but it basically is like every company in the world could advertise with us for whatever reason. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's still difficult, but when you've got, 7 boat brands and like 7 board brands, and then you got to say, okay, well, half of them respect what we're doing. They all respected what we were doing, but then like
half of them are actually going to put dollars towards this.
Right. Yeah. And then how much is that? And the other half are like, well, we kind of got to put money elsewhere, or, our numbers are down. So it's, it was painfully obvious to us that it was happening in front of our eyes, but it was like, we were trying our best. And the conversations I would have, with the clients that were like pulling their money out and just saying, we love the magazine, but we just can't spend this year. And you're like, then when I knew the real turning point was when you weren't selling for the value or the return they were going to get on their ads and on their spend. When I was selling on like, you just got to support, like you don't want this to go away.
Yeah.
And it was desperate and just yucky. So it was, a very good exercise to go through, to be honest. Like, but it made it extra weird. There was like, there's so much baggage of like historical relationships with all these people. They're like, yeah, remember when it was great? And now you're kind of like taking my job out from underneath me, but it's not really your fault. But yeah, that's a rough spot to be.
I mean, 100%, it totally is. And I feel like almost everyone can agree that they'd love to see a print,
magazine of some sort in every industry you're passionate about, whether it's flying or whether it's wakeboarding, being as small as it is. But at a certain point, it just becomes unjustifiable for everybody involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be surprised if something comes along one day that is sustainable. If it's just, yeah, it's a different monster. But yeah, all of those people that I was having that conversation with were all saying the same things. It's not like we don't love when the magazine comes out. You know, maybe they would say that if they didn't get any athletes in there or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
But well, that was the hard part, because then we had to put magazines together and we were trying to support the brands that supported us. And then if there was a brand that blatantly didn't support us, like, we're trying to do a service to our audience to say, like, yeah, this is what's going on in the sport. But then it became, again, like a game of survival. And you're like, why would I give love to this boat brand when this is the boat brand that's paying my paycheck? You know, like, so yeah, it was, yeah. Like I said, a good exercise to go through, but all of those people, while they were pulling their dollars, said, I don't want to see it go away, but I can't support it anymore. So
it's just a harsh reality, but I just want to touch on, because you just mentioned it, that there is maybe a path somewhere in the future that, I mean, obviously we have Sienna, who does Copycats Club, the women's only, wake magazine, but in terms of one that would involve everybody, what would you see that path being if someone were to say, hey, I'm going to make an annual, or maybe I'm going to make, something like that? What?
Yeah, I think you'd have to lean into, I think the views have changed. When you're talking to these brands that are answering to a board, right? They've got to tell them why they're spending their dollars here, here, and here. The most success we had, the longest, the success with the longevity came from the Paul O'Briens of the world, who, sure, he's got to answer to, I mean, I don't know if he does or not, but Paul's like, we will support that. I give Don Wallace a lot of credit, because Don Wallace, even though he was under a lot of the same pressure as others, I don't know if it was him sticking his neck out, but there were things that he didn't want to let go of and wanted to continue to support. But anybody that was like, I mean, like the Roswell dudes, like Rob Oswald, support us, because he wanted it around. He wanted to run ads, and it was basically his decision. When it was in the hands of like a marketing director, those were the first ones to go, because they were justifying their own job. They wanted to save their own job.
Yeah,
I'm not going to throw money into something I can't prove an ROI on. So, but to answer your question, I've gotten this question from folks that have reached out to me about wanting to get another full-length film going, and the funding, and whether I would help or not, and all that stuff. I always love being reached out to for those questions, even if they want me involved or not, just to bounce it off. But I always have kind of gone back to like a crowd-funded project, and leaning into those that, like, you want to see it. Well, how bad do you want to see it? Right. So I think what you're doing with the Patreon thing, like, surely they're not getting like, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, there's an element of that. That's when you go straight to the person with, like, where the passion is, and people are willing to spend on their passion. So,
yeah.
So whether it's like, I gave the advice of like, I don't know, do a GoFundMe, but get like super creative with it, hit it really hard.
Do it legitimate. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure people have tried that. That's where my head goes. 'Cause, and who knows, it might come around where the boat companies might jump in and go, no, we need to spend on this. I doubt it, but, specific to wakeboarding only, but that would be a path, I think.
I totally agree with that. I think, and that's, there's a lot of downsides to technology and all that stuff, but that's one of the beauties, is you can directly reach the people who are super curious about and into all this stuff. So
yeah,
rather the days of they need a magazine to be able to read an interview or whatever.
Oh, right.
You can DM them. They can message you. They can, like, so all that stuff, gets rid of all the barriers in between the passionate people who do it for a living and the passionate people who pay to do it. Mm-hmm. So a GoFundMe or something, and then who knows, maybe you get enough GoFundMe that some brands are like, wow, that, there's a lot of attention towards this.
Exactly. Yep.
Maybe we'll put some money to advertise with them or whatever.
Right.
So
right.
that's an interesting I think that was an important topic, and you're one of the most qualified people to answer. You've been behind the scenes. Speaking behind the scenes, what are some of the biggest things you've learned from going from a pro rider to being on the behind the scenes, aspect of Wakeboarding Mag and the industry?
Oh yeah, just that it was way more about the advertisers than I would have hoped. So as a fan, you just think everybody that's in there is in there because they earned it, and not to say they didn't, but it's like, you don't think there's any extenuating influence on why that person was on the cover that month. Going then to the other side, it was like, hey, we haven't had a Ronix guy on the cover in a few months, and they're a big supporter, so let's figure that out. So like those kinds of things were, unfortunately, and I can say this now because Bonnier's been sold and it's, under new management and everything. A lot of the same staff has been maintained, which is really cool, but sort of the positions we were put in where, you wanted to believe that whatever was going on in the pages were fully representative of what was going on out there, right? Come to find out, it's like, oh, they don't cover that rider because none of their sponsors advertise. And it's like, dang, that was rough to figure out. I mean, I knew a little bit about that, in my Quicksilver days, like, managing that team. And it was sort of like, we would get a ton of love because we were throwing some money around, so I got that. I understood a little bit, but I didn't know to the extent that it was actually like talked about, like in edit planning, like who are we going to cover? Yeah, but I mean, maybe we can do something with them on the web, but
yeah.
So again, I get it because they're just trying to support a staff of people and, maintain this, position in the industry, and, throwing love around to those that weren't supporting. It's like, it didn't make any sense, so
It's a business at the end of the day. And if your magazine's constantly supporting the brands that don't pay you, the brands that do pay you are going to be,
pissed.
Why am I paying you?
Oh, we'd get phone calls. Yeah, for sure. Oh, they didn't run an ad. Why? You're like,
we can't just only do
yeah,
at a certain point. Because at a certain point, you do have to walk the line of, well, this rider rides for a company that doesn't support us, but he still deserves, he still deserves some love and appreciation. It's not his choice at a certain point that he's riding for this brand that doesn't support us. But I can see that being a harsh reality, maybe is a way to put it.
Especially at the time. I think when everybody was advertising and there was just tons of money flowing, you get away with it. Like, we got to fill some pages, we'll give this guy love because we got space for it.
Yeah.
Or 12 covers a year, we can throw a few covers out there that we want to put out. But
let's talk about Wake Awards. So just recently, what was it? It was last week or a week and a half ago.
Yeah, last week. Yeah.
You presented Thomas Herman the award of Trick of the Year, which is one of the biggest. Personally, I think it's the biggest Wake Award for me. It's the one I'm most excited about, and I think a lot of riders are as well. But Wake Awards as a whole is not happening this year.
Right. So, the way the story goes, I've been connected to Wakeboarding Mag and writing some articles for the web about some boat contests and stuff, just on a contract basis. So like, strategically, didn't know what their plans were. And I'm at the gym, and Jake Ramsdell is like, dude, it sucks there's no Wake Awards. That was a bad Jake impression, but he said, yeah, it sucks there's no Wake Awards this year. And I was like, oh man, I hadn't heard. And I'm like, oh, I know why he's saying that, because of Thomas. And I was like, man, that does suck. Like, what a bummer. I get back to my truck, and I got a text from Zach White out in Utah from Marine Products, who we used to hang out, and he'd drive the boat for me when I'd go out there for clinics. And he's like, hey, I heard there's no Wake Awards. I'm like, I just heard that too. And then John Dreiling hit me up and was like, hey, heard there's no Wake Awards. And I'm like, yeah, man. And it was sort of like, in a way, I appreciated that people were reaching out to me, because I've been gone for 3 years. So, I know they're maybe just looking for information or something like that, but I kind of maybe took that as I feel like I could probably do something about that. And Zach said it, well, he goes, well, yeah, like Kevin Falvey's not taking my call, and so Kevin Falvey runs a boating mag, which is, where the water sports brands live under. And we've been talking, and I actually was moving down a path of like, hey, maybe we could, find funding and, create the online, content portion of Wake Awards just to like keep it going, and there, Bonnier's under, Bonnier sold the water sports titles. So all those brands, well, and all marine titles actually. So all of those brands were going through like this huge transition and becoming under new ownership. And it was just sort of a project that didn't make any sense to tackle. Probably both from a revenue standpoint, but also we don't know how this is all going to shake out. So all this is kind of happening while I'm in touch with Kevin Falvey, and we were close to pulling the trigger I was going to get involved and work with their, staff and everything to help put Wake Awards on digitally. It's better than nothing. It might take, nothing's going to beat that, that big room full of people, but it still matters, right? It still matters to people. It's inspiring. It's something to work towards. So throughout this discussion with Kevin Falvey, we kind of were spitballing back and forth, and I was like, well, we can still give him Trick of the Year. And, actually Falvey said, I'd like to honor Thomas with like a performance, like Performance of the Year or something. I'm like, well, why don't it can still be Wake Awards Trick of the Year. And the reason why that's still valid is because almost every single category went to a panel vote. So we would pick a panel of, industry people, photographers, even some of the Alliance guys were on the panel, just to get a full view of like what everybody thought about best wake rider, best boat rider, or best park rider, best, full scope, and all those different categories. But legend, we would take nominations for, but the staff would always make that decision, as well as Trick of the Year. And part of the reason for that was because we want to keep everything under wraps, and trick nominations would come in the day before. And so we were like, well, yeah, it just comes from us. And so if we get it wrong, like whatever, but I would say there wasn't many years in the history of Wake Awards. Maybe there was one or two that were maybe questionable. The argument could be made either way, but most of the years it was kind of like, well, yeah, that's going to win, I would say. But yeah, so anyway, so we were like, yeah, we can, I say we, but it could still be a Wake Awards Trick of the Year because it's still legit. It still comes from like the voice of the brand, which I was speaking as the voice of the brand, even though I hadn't been there. I was just sort of like heading up this little project. And then it started as, okay, cool, let's present this to him and, catch it on video and have him be like, yeah, cool. And then I was like, hold on, I know who to call. I called Travis Moy. I was like, dude, what do you think about? And he was like 1,000% in. And it just so happened we were talking about like when the right time to do it is. And he's like, you wouldn't believe it, but this week that I have in January is hardcore wakeboard guys. Like they only wakeboard. They don't want to wake surf. They don't want to ski. They're here to wakeboard. They watch videos in between their sets. He's like, it's 2005 up in here. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then we were talking about like, let's rally some of the dudes to come out and like, how cool it would be, even if there were only like 10 of us showed up, and then, the campers that were there, it would make them feel special. It's awesome. And then it just sort of, I don't know, it was sort of a little passion project for me to, rally some people. And I know more people wanted to be there and, couldn't, but it like his dad flew down and just awesome stuff. And I coached Thomas when he was like 9 or 10 years old. So I used to coach Tyler Worrell, on a weekly basis. He lived in Claremont, great family. And then they put on like what we called the Worrell wake camp, and Thomas and Tyler were friends. So I coached him a few times. I mean, I'm not going to take credit for
The triple.
I joked while we were out there. I was like, yeah, I mean, I told you if you work on these things, you will land a triple flip one day.
It's pretty much my wake award.
Yeah, right. Well, actually, so that's the other thing I wanted to clarify. So I actually did give him my award. So there's a plaque that was made up that said, congratulations, wakeboard.
Yeah.
But when we were clearing out our offices, actually during COVID, so we were still like, MAG hadn't like fully shut down yet, or the brand's never shut down. It's still alive. But like right before COVID, we were moving out of our offices. So we we're clearing out everything. And each of us had a few of the Wake Awards, because we always had extras made over the years. So there was great decorations. The 3DW was so cool. Mike Forrest designed that. One of the best designers I've ever worked with. And so I had two of them sitting in my office, my home office. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to give him one of these for sure. Cause yeah, it was cool to have two different colors, but I'm like, I don't need two of these. And like, he deserves it. And it was a cool feeling, and even cooler was when I told Garrett about what we were doing. He goes, one of the first things he said was, I'll give him one of my wake awards. I've got two, and so he thought the exact same thing. I was like, oh dude, it's all good. I already got mine, but
Got it covered.
But Garrett thought the same way I did. And so I did want to clarify it because his dad left me a message and said, hey, I heard a rumor that you gave him one of the awards that you won. And he's like, I just think that's the most amazing thing. And I was like, whoa, it was my personal one. I did not win it.
A little bit of a difference.
Yeah. I want to make that clear because, and then the truth be told, I never did win a Wake Award myself. I was nominated for a few different things, but I never won. So
I took the dub. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask on that. I wasn't sure if you ever got one.
nope, just nominated.
You have one left still though, right?
Yes. Yeah. I have a bunch from different years.
Oh, okay.
Some of
Just
the
extras. Yeah.
Yeah, or but those ones I think were the best ones that we made, at least in my time.
It's a cool looking physical piece of award.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yep.
So do you think there's any way that Wake Awards could become maybe not what it was, but more than what happened with Thomas? So something,
Yeah.
in between.
No, right. Yeah, I think that's the big question. I think that's why this was really important to do, not only for Thomas, because if it wasn't going to happen in that situation, it nothing. I mean, it's like if Trick of the Year was like whatever, like something that kind of
Double grab back nine. Or
cool.
whatever,
Yeah, right. Like
something.
whatever. But I mean, this was such a mark in the progression of the sport, and the awards and Trick of the Year was created for that exact reason. Like when Kevco and Jim Emmons created Wake Awards back in the day, it was, like Kevin didn't make any extra money because of it. Like he wasn't like, oh, cool, we'll add this and we'll drive more revenue or more commission for him. He was on the editorial side, but he was like, dude, this would be awesome. And it would make a real impact on the sport.
Yeah.
And it totally did, but I think that if we had not done this and just let it go, I got to stop saying we, if, Falvey and Boating Mag and wakeboarding didn't, move this forward and, have a videographer out there and do all that stuff. I think it probably would have fizzled out. It would be a tough conversation to be like, oh yeah, we just didn't do it, and now we're going to do it again. So I think there's probably more of a chance. Just personally, I feel like I don't know. It was a really good response too from either the riders and people that were like, wow, this was actually really cool. And obviously well deserved, but
yeah.
I will say that's actually I thought I was done with my special moments that I'll always remember in wakeboarding. And a lot of them oddly are tied to Wake Awards. When awarding Brad Smela the Trick of the Year that year was so heavy and so amazing. And then I don't know if it was the next year or the year after, probably the year after, when we surprised everybody with him being there, and we worked it out with the stage setup and everything to have the lift there to get him on stage. And it was just there's things like that were like crazy impactful. And Ben LeClaire, you know, that year having him out there, and and nothing will recreate that room of everybody's there, everybody's having fun. You know, it was our big night. You know, it was like it made the sport feel like it was our Emmys. You know, So I don't think it'll ever get back to that. I do think would be content angles to take, and then not to say that there isn't going to be a party again. You know, anybody, like, they could do that and just pick a spot and do it until Surf Expo wins everybody back, or everybody decides to go back to Surf Expo. There's no place where the whole industry is together at the same time.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how else you would make it that many important people in the same room at the same time.
I just feel like you need that night of a lot of people, a lot of the riders, a lot of people in the industry getting together, celebrating what happened in the past year, trick-wise, you know, achievement-wise, rewarding the riders from the riders in the sense of these as a publication about wakeboarding by people who wakeboard and stuff like that. It just makes the sport feel real. It legitimizes the sport. There's so much to it that, you know, whatever the award show looks like in the future could change, but I think you need something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was heartbreaking the first year we couldn't do it because of the hurricane, and we had to produce it. I'm sure, I think Garrett talked about this when he was on. I listened to his, but we basically had to produce it twice because one was for the live show that didn't happen, and then we had to do it on video and figure out a whole path there. But I was a part of every single Wake Awards, first like 9 were as an athlete. Next 2 were on the content creation side, and, you know, flow of show and all that. And then the last, however many, were from sitting in the producer seat, like raising money to put it all on. And then I think there were 2 that I wasn't a part of. And then this one, which I think is the 20th year. I think Kevco and I were trying to figure that out.
Okay.
I think Thomas would have been like the 20th year trick of the year. But I don't know. Maybe somebody can.
Yeah, we can fact check that. Throw that in the comments if you know. Fact check that. We got so we'll kind of jump out of Wakeboarding Mag a little bit, and then I got some takes I want to hear from you on wakeboarding and all that stuff. This is a question from Daniel Jarrett. This is a question and kind of a statement. He's going, you're on a short list of one of the most stylish riders behind the boat of all time. Schmaltz, Smith, Nelly, Horrell, Byerly, Randall. He's naming off a bunch of just legends. What/who influenced you, and how did you privately think about paving your own way in the sport?
Well, that's very, very nice to say. Thank you, Daniel. I would say Byerly from the early days influenced just how he approached the sport. I thought it just looked so cool. There was a sequence of him doing a grab back mob, which I thought back mob was a cool trick because it was hard. But then I saw the sequence of him doing a grab back mob off the double up, and I was like, damn, that looks awesome. And it looks hard. Like, it looks way harder. So, you know, grabbing the board, I think, was influenced by sort of the, you know, Byerly, and I think I watched snowboarding videos. Like, I wasn't a snowboarder, like I said, but I always thought it looked really cool. I just love big, slow, cool looking grab tricks. And then even when they started getting into the more technical stuff, I was impressed by how they could grab it for so long, or those kinds of things. And I was just always jealous they didn't have a handle in their hand, you know. But yeah, so I would say I was influenced by snowboarding just in sort of how tricks looked. But then, yeah, I mean, all the guys on that list that you just said are heavy influence. Like, I mean, I would say Randall's an influence on me, but I think that's like the way that he rides still, like, and the intensity. I mean, that I would take things to the flats, but not like him. You know, I would try to maybe like grab things and, you know, mimic certain tricks that he was doing. I just never got to his level, but
Well, nobody else did. So
yeah, I guess that's, yeah. But if I could say that like the next generation of riders, like maybe post, you know, my stint, but like Twelker, I loved watching Twelker ride, still do. I shouldn't say loved. I love watching him ride. And then Tyler Hyam. Those guys like took what I always wanted to do, which was end up doing really, really technical, difficult tricks and make them look really good and feel good. And they did what I had my vision of wakeboarding to be. I think, you know, like with Sam Brown, that's a completely different level. I didn't even imagine that. But I did picture how cool it would be to do like a really deliberate, slow, poked out, you know, late grab 7 or something like that. And like those guys just ended up doing what
they embody it. Yeah, they create it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that. What does it mean to be a sellout?
Depends. Totally depends.
Do you think you have to sell out?
It depends on how you define selling out. You know, obviously the term comes from like a music thing, right? When like a band, in my head, it comes from
I agree.
A band was so good and everybody found out about them and now they're sellouts because they got a deal and they sound different than they used to, so they're no good anymore. That's, you know, so it's like a, you know, the recency bias of success like triggers that word, I think, for people. My own personal example of that was on the old Wake World forums, where I went from being the guy that was brought up as the most underrated rider. Oh, Benny G, most underrated rider. And I would see it all the time and be like, wow, that's super cool. As soon as, I mean, within a year, it changed from, I haven't seen any new tricks from him. Oh yeah, you know, like he's got, it's just because of Quicksilver. You only got that because of this or whatever. And I'm like, I started to see some like hate online. I was like, whoa, like what happened to
that was fast.
I'm like, what happened to the, you know, underrated part? So I don't know. To me, it's like, if it's like a money thing, if like, oh, well, you're just, you know, taking money, like if you're not in those shoes of like, you're offered a bigger contract or you're talking to a sponsor and you're trying to make more money, like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think to me, it's more of a personality thing. Like when people's personalities change.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know, it's sort of like, you know, it's hard not to. Like I even referred to it before. Like I felt myself acting different ways or saying different things that were a little bit outside of my comfort zone. But I, you know, I'm like, well, you know, whatever. I'm one of the guys. Like, you know, so it felt
bringing home the bacon right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's like, so I don't really know. I don't really know what I think it is. I don't know if this has ever been said before, but like, selling, not, you know, how like the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, like it's selling out is in the view of the person saying it, not the person doing it, you know, because if
it's a great way to put it.
If like, well, that's not the Benny G that I knew because now he wears these brands and now it's like this. I liked him better before that or when he had hair or whatever, you know, it's like,
you like him now that he can pay his mortgage in his house?
Yeah, right. Like, what am I supposed to do? Say, no, thanks. I'm in it for the love, not the money. Like, I'm in it for the money because it helps support what I was doing because I loved it so much.
Yeah, it's balance, right? So, I mean, yeah, if you let it change you personality-wise, definitely, you know, you can get a negative connotation with sellout. But if you know, I think Massey's a great guy to use as an example of like a perfect way to, not perfect way, but a great way to do it is he's getting support from a lot of big brands. Oh. But he still cares about wakeboarding to its core, and you can't fake that. So
yeah, he's one of my favorites.
I think he's like a lot of wakeboarders' favorite wakeboarder, which is one of the highest praises I think you can receive.
I wrote that in the when he won Masters. I wrote like, you know, one of the most well-liked wakeboarders out there. And then I did a Chat GPT test where I asked Chat GPT to write an article about Massey winning after I had already written it. And one of the phrases it pulled out of was one of the most well-liked wakeboarders. I was like, now I understand what ChatGPT is doing.
That's what it does.
Like I wrote that, not ChatGPT. Anyway.
Do you need a $200,000 boat to wakeboard? And what do you think about boat prices?
Yeah. So, no, obviously not. You don't need a $200,000 boat. They're awesome to have. I would take one tomorrow if someone wanted to give me one, but no, absolutely not. And I approach that with like how it is with my family now. Like Kevin Michael, again, such a good dude. He's got his old Nautique. He's made it absolutely badass. He's totally redone it, but it's, I think he got it for, way less than 200 grand, we'll say. But that's how I experience love on the water now, is like teaching my boys how to go ride. And we only get out a couple times a summer, but I was talking to John Dreiling about buying his Mastercraft that he had, and I was like, yeah, it's only a couple $1,000, but like for what we want to use it for, it's perfect, So, and I do have a theory about the whole, like, well, this is what wakeboarding is now. Like wakeboarding is the newest, $500,000 boat, and the wake and the wave are so big. And you can look at what these people are doing behind it, these pros, and then like, that's what you can have. And I've always actually said it's like buying a Ferrari. Like most people that buy a Ferrari buy it because of like, the status symbol or whatever. And it's probably awesome to drive around, but most of them are not taking it to the track and putting it through the paces of like
what it's built to.
Yeah. Right. So just like these boats, people aren't doing, Moab 7s.
Wake 10s. Yeah. They're not.
Yeah. Like, and, but it's not to say like, it's not good to have that. Like I said, if I could afford it, I'd absolutely be there, but it doesn't mean, that it's not wakeboarding, right? Or wake surfing. It's better, right? There's no argument that it's not, it can do more and it's more comfortable and music's better and more bells and whistles and all that stuff. But, where I think the market has gone and why there's so much like backlash against the boat companies and like, how could they do this? They're killing the sport and all, like, yes and no, right? It's like, they wouldn't be building them in the way that they are if they weren't selling them, right? They're a business that, their mission statements will all say something different, but at the end of the day, it's to return value to their shareholders. So they're not building boats for hardcore wakeboard enthusiasts. In fact, my take on it is like, if you're a hardcore wakeboard enthusiast, you might even pride yourself on the fact that you don't need that, and that it is all extra. And that it's like, why do you need this or that or the other? I don't want to throw any company under the bus, but it's like, there's a little bit of like pride that a real hardcore enthusiast might have, that they're like, I can do anything that you're trying to do behind your boat, I can do it better behind mine. So I think that's where this like rift is between, the newest, nicest, most expensive boats that are being purchased by people on the upper echelon of earnings. And that's awesome. I'm really glad they do.
Free to spend their money how they please.
Yeah. And I'm glad to see that more, like that the wake surfing and, it's like, I don't know, someone that used to work for a boat brand, works for a different brand now, said like when wake surfing was taken off, he's like, I don't know, man. Doctors love to wake surf. It's just like, we're killing it. Doctors love it. Like, so I get that. But the person that's like, dude, I watched every single Randall Harris video, is not racing to go buy the newest. If they can afford it, great. They probably are. But are they going to change? Like, are they going to, remortgage their house so that they can buy a brand new, super expensive boat? Like, probably not. They're probably going, I got my own, 2004, whatever. The wake's great. That's all I need. That's just, I don't know if that's like a, this reality that I've created in my own head, but I do think there's something to that. Because if I were to get a boat, especially where I am in my life, I would get something with that decent wake, not a ton of bells and whistles that, could put some weight in, but, I don't need it to scare me on a double up or something.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And I mean, in a sense, that's where a lot of people's energy, if you're talking about the loud, vocal minority, right? A lot of their energy is put towards dogging really expensive boats, but yeah, completely ignoring the fact that there are manufacturers who do create boats that are, not as cheap as they used to be, but with inflation, I bet they're not that far off. Mm-hmm. If you just strip it down to what you need to wakeboard, wake surf, whatever, they're still being created. So they're still out there. But yeah, the vocal minority always loves to dog the expensive toys.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I get it.
If it gets your rocks off, go for it. I don't know what to tell you though. What is wakeboarding's best looking trick?
Yeah, good question. Just like of all time.
Of all time.
I mean, I'd have to, I was trying to find another answer besides the method, but, I think the method is just like a staple done right. It looks awesome no matter what sport,
Who's got the best method then?
Randall.
Okay. There you go. What is your best score bowling?
287 or 289. Yeah. I was in a bowling league for 2 years.
Oh, I know you have a bowling history.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked, but I did not know it was that high.
It was 280 something. It's on my Facebook somewhere. I think I posted it.
For all the bowlers, perfect score is 300, right? So
yeah, I was only one ball away from a perfect game. And so I think it was nerd bowling stuff, you get,
at the
three
end,
throws, you get 3. And I think I 2 strikes and then I missed that. So it wouldn't have been a 289. It would have been a little bit less than that. But
okay. Very close to the perfect game though.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it specifically. Aaron, because I lived next to the bowling alley. My friends owned it. Still do. Jess and Steve Webster, awesome people. And I was like, I joke, it was stumbling distance from my house. So yeah, I spent a lot of time there. And we were up there and like, we were all just like, yeah, we'll meet at the bowling alley and then figure out what we're doing for the night. And then like Aaron walked in with some people and he was like, yeah. And he looked up and saw what I had, like 7 strikes in a row or whatever it was. And he was like tapping everybody like, shut up, don't say anything. Let's just like, don't screw this up. It was like obviously someone walking in going, whoa, perfect game. And like, yeah, that you just cursed
right
it
there.
Yeah. Aaron, it's funny because Aaron was around enough to know that he was like, oh, this is unique. But that was the only one.
We talked about this before the podcast, but when was the last time you rode? I was going to say how often do you ride, but it sounds like the better question is when was the last time you rode?
I rode 2.5 years ago with Derek Cook and Dallas. And then before that, it had been years, like, it's maybe 4, unfortunately, but a lot by choice, not for lack of opportunity. I think for me, now at this point, now that my boys are old enough, like I'm looking for opportunities to get back on the water, where I think for a few years I wasn't. I just didn't really, it wasn't something that I was like striving or longing to do. Of course, I'd drive by, hold it and look down. It's like super glassy. It would be like, yeah, that's cool. But it didn't really make me want to go through the effort of like how sore I was going to be and, the hit to the ego of like, ugh. And then this is the next question that everybody says is like, well, why don't you just get out there and carve around? Because it's not that much fun for me. Like what was fun for me in wakeboarding was like, obviously going high in the air is always fun. But like the progression and like the honing of different tricks and those kinds of things were, that was what became the most fun thing for me over the years. So I don't know, when people say just go out there and carve around, like I'd rather like screw around on a foil if I'm just going to go do that and like try something new. And yeah, get embarrassed doing that, then, you know.
So do you think if, you were to get a boat, say a mid 2000s wakeboard boat with a decent wake, do you think if you bumped it down to, I don't know, 20 miles an hour, 19 miles an hour, 65 feet, would you have fun?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if we're looking at that, because that's a different conversation. That's like me out with my
With
boys
your kids,
and
yeah,
my
yeah.
wife and like some friends or something like that. But like, and I highly appreciate, like, I'll get offers from different riders like, oh, you got to come out. And I really want to go out and watch these guys free ride. But I then tend to hold back and not, follow through on saying like, yeah, let's set it up, because I don't have as much time as I used to, but also I don't want to let them down by like saying I don't want to ride. Or if I do ride, then I feel like I'm going to put myself in an uncomfortable situation because I'm not going to do anything hard. Like, so even when I rode with Dallas and Derek, I was like, oh, I could probably still do like a wrap, toe side, back side off axis 3. And I went to go do it and kind of got stretched out. My timing's all off, right? And the tension like yanked super hard. I was like, oh my God. And then I just didn't try that trick again because it was like, not in a way embarrassing that I couldn't do it, but I was sort of like, oh, and I kind of like, it hurt a bit, you know? So I don't know. I do think if I were to have my own setup and all that, or if it was a really super consistent thing, like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. But oftentimes I'm like, I don't know. Let me try that foil over there. That looks fun. Like something different.
Yeah. I get that. Totally understand that. Most overrated trick in wakeboarding.
Not that I even came close to trying one. But I think at this point, the double flip is, like a double cab is it's just lost its like uniqueness. Like when Twelker, right? Twelker did the first one off the wake, right? First double cab I'm talking about. Yeah. Trevor Hansen did the first double flip off the wake. My boy. Oh, that was my bowling partner, by the way.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, for the first year. Yeah. And then Chad Lowe, who lived with me, was second year. Just had to throw bowling back in there. But no, I think the wakes are so big now. It's like, it's just not this unattainable, like, holy crap, you just did 2 flips. It's almost like the way snowboarding went when it was like the double cab was invented. It was like, oh my God, that's so crazy. And now it's like, oh,
in the past. Yeah.
Well, or it's like that trick looks better without a double cork, So, and again, not to take anything away from.
Yeah, you're not dogging it, but it's just things are overrated, underrated. So what's underrated? What's the most underrated trick?
I mean, old me would say some type of technical backside 180 into the flats. Because it was very hard for me. Like I think I mentioned to you before we started, but like I could not land.
You had some damn good ones though in those videos.
Well, right. So I worked
after you got
really,
them,
really hard on it. Like that, it was a complete weakness of mine that I focused on and then turned it into a strength. And just like spinning, I had all the basic inverts when I moved to Florida. And then I was kind of bad at spinning. I think the best thing I had was like a toe 5. And then I like really, really focused on that. So, but the most underrated. Yeah. I don't know. Actually, doing a method out in the flats is hard if you want to keep it flat and controlled and grab it for a long time.
Yeah.
Because it's so twisted up. Because by the time you're swinging this far outside of the boat, you're twisting even more.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Randall does a good one to the flats. Keep bringing his name up for a reason. Mm-hmm. Being around as long as you have in wakeboarding, is there any names that jump out to you as far as riders who never got the shot they might have deserved, or never got the support they deserved, or, any names that jump out at you as, man, if that guy just, maybe would have podiumed one time or did this or did that?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, it is interesting to see. I mean, there were times that, you have sort of that, like survivor's remorse in that, like, well, how come I made it? Like that guy was way better than I was. It just, something didn't click. Or like for me, like, yeah, the Alliance guys supporting me was like, that was like the base of what kind of, I think, propelled me to, the next few years. But It's weird to say because he definitely had and still is around, still riding a lot. But I think Josh Twelker probably should have gotten more. Like it's not that he didn't get the coverage or, you know, he had some sponsors and stuff, but I feel like in terms of like a, you know, household name, whatever that it means in wakeboarding.
Yeah.
And I think that's a testament to how great I think he is at riding. That yes, he was in videos and yes, but I think of him even like on another level of that. Like, you know, and you know, maybe it's just that he hasn't been not out of the game because I know he's still out there riding, but like,
let's see some clips then, Talker. Where they at?
Yeah, no,
Let's see some
seriously.
clips. Seriously, let's see some clips. Yeah.
But like, you know, I just think he's like crazy talented.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, Kyle Alberts, you know, Spencer Norris's, you know, that video of Kyle, like that dude, like I remember seeing tricks. I'm like, wait, it's like him and Danny Harf are the only ones doing that, you know, like toe side, back side, off axis fives and stuff. I'm like, geez, like he's doing like back nines when that was not a popular trick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Spencer told that story really well in that video, but Kyle's one of the guys that sticks out like that too.
Yeah, I think that name was thrown out before when I asked that question as well, which, yeah, that video. All right, technical stuff. So you don't ride anymore, or maybe you'll ride soon. You haven't ridden in a while.
Yeah.
What was your board setup, let's say, right at the end of your career? Board setup, rope length, speed, you know, kind of going on a set. What's it looking like?
Still rocking. Oh, no. I was going to say ultras, like, you know, no leather in my boots. Can't stand it. Keep that in the snow.
Can't stand it, literally.
keep the leather on the mountain, not on the water. That's my take.
Okay.
No, I just thought that whole thing was that movement, I think, really hurt the sport of wakeboarding.
I agree.
You know, having a deep background in coaching, I saw people take like falls that they did not deserve. I used to say that, I'm like, you did not deserve to fall as hard as you did. You just got, you know, clipped the wake, kicked a little 90, landed in the trough, hooked at the back edge, and your bell is rung. When had you been wearing bindings that you'd be released from, it wouldn't have been as bad. It still would have hurt.
Yeah.
But, you know, anyway, I had to throw that part in there.
That's a good thing to throw out there. 5:05, so.
Okay. Couple more minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Setup, so speed, rope length, all that stuff. No leather, obviously.
Yeah. One of the last like witnesses, of whatever year that was. I think I have one more in the wrapper, you know, unopened. But I have all the old years, you know, the ones that I rode. But no, I'll still rock ultras. But when I was riding a lot, it would have been like the lace up ultras, like the ones that you crank down a little bit. And then a wrap handle, which the wrapping thing came like towards the end of my career because it was just something that like I hadn't explored much, and it didn't take, you know, me like killing myself to advance or progress. So, you know, I gravitated towards that. Rope length, I don't even remember, maybe 82 and a half.
Okay.
Yeah. Because one of the reasons why, like when I rode for Supra and I had that 24 SSV, the wake was really narrow. And so I didn't like a narrow wake. I liked a really wide wake. So I kept having to back my,
you got to get back out there.
Yeah. And so I ended up riding a long rope, not to make statements, but just to be like, well, that's just what really worked for my boat.
Need that transition over there. And
yeah, I wasn't good at like I had to I'd loaded the rope a lot, and it was hard to do that. Like kind of the new age of wakeboarding was you kind of come in and bounce off the wake and, you know, take it straight up. And so that's why they could shorten up and go super slow. I couldn't do that. So, that would be the setup.
Getting far back there. All right, so we'll wrap it up with we got 4 Patreon questions, so you can kind of rip through these. We got Travis Moy is wondering, is it true that in your latter years you've become Benny Ski?
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, the other part of that answer is when's the last time I wakeboarded. So I've slalom skied more than I've wakeboarded in the last however many years. So, I think we're at like, oh no. This is good. So we were up in Seattle for a Pro Tour stop, and being at Bonnier, we owned the Pro Tour at the time, and got to go up there and judge or do whatever. And then Paul O'Brien was nice enough to invite everybody out to Radar for like a little reception. And I brought my board shorts, and I just had them just in case there was a chance to get on the lake, like doing whatever. And then McKay, what's his first name?
Adam?
Yeah. Adam McKay. Yeah. Super awesome guy. He's like, Benny G, are those board shorts in your pocket? Like, what's up with that? And I was like, yeah, just in case there was a chance. And he was like, dude, we got you. So we came back, Sean Perry, Emily Dale, and I came back, and I'm like, well, if I'm going to be on this lake, I'm going to take a slalom ski, like just, homage to the legends of Radar and Herb and everything. So I skied, and it was like super fun. Perry got a photo of me, like my tongue out, like smiling, making this turn. And it was so cool. So after that, and that also the only time I've ever barefoot in my life is on Radar.
It's a good place to do it.
Yeah. So anyway, So then I started going out to the boarding school when Travis was doing his beers, buoys, and barbecue. And I'm like, this is super fun. So I went out there like, probably 10 times or so to ski, something like that. So,
Okay.
yeah, I need to get back out actually.
Benny Ski. I like it.
Yeah.
Ryan Shimabukuro is asking, I hope I said that right. How hard was the transition from being a pro rider working on the other side of the sport with Bonnier? And did you get any static from any pro riders for doing that? So you kind of answered the first part, but the second part, did you get any static, which I guess is like negative feedback maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. No, in fact, I actually got a lot of positivity. When I shared the news, I was actually golfing with Parks and Danny, and I was like, I knew it was coming, but I hadn't like really told many people yet. And besides like close friends, but, so I was like, yeah, this is the deal. And they were like, yes, like they thought it was super cool. And I think from their standpoint, it was like, cool. Like it's I'm not on their level in terms of like all the things they accomplished, but it was like a peer in a way that was stepping into that role.
We got a good guy on the inside.
Yeah.
That's kind of what
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually got, and then I got a bunch of phone calls and stuff from people that I hadn't heard from for a while. So I kind of knew why that was. But no. I did, the Alliance guys, they were my first call was to Garrett and Bill McCaffrey, just to say thank you for everything. And, and I, use the same phrase. I'm like, you guys didn't offer me a job.
That's
so
true. If you really wanted me, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm available.
Yeah. But no, and I never got any
Good.
shittiness from them either.
Cool.
Bill and I were always cool. Garrett and I were always still close friends. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Chad Korecki is wondering, so he's wondering what your favorite video part is. We touched on that already. He's wondering if you have a favorite photo, and then if there's ever a rider of the year that you maybe did not agree with.
Okay. So sorry, the first part was
Favorite photo that you've had of run of you.
of me. I mean, that cover, my last cover of wakeboarding, I thought was pretty cool. Just the colors and like the moment that Joey caught the method was like in a really good position, which I really liked.
Yeah,
and
I'll
it
see
was,
if I can throw that in here.
Yeah, it was from the boat too, which is unique, I think, because I think that trick looks best from the boat when done correctly. But I know you and Garrett touched on it in his episode, but I had a lot of backlit Pete Rose
So
shots.
that was another Garrett question.
Yeah. So because this sounds weird to say, but there were so many, I don't know which one of those was my favorite. So it's sort of like I had a lot of flavors of my favorite there. So
What was that backlit Pete called? The guaranteed select? Is that what it?
yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. And then, I mean, you might not have any you didn't agree with, but were there any rider of the years that you didn't agree with, or people didn't agree with, maybe?
In a weird way, I feel like I was probably maybe the most controversial one, which is fine. At least it's something.
Gets the people talking.
Right. No, but I mean, I think I appreciate what they do in the way that they choose it, and it's not consistent in terms of what it is that made that person. It's like there's no formula, and I think that's why it bothered a lot of people. It probably bothered people that look at contests like, well, if I do this trick, then I beat that guy because he didn't do this trick because I did X, Y, and Z. Yeah. So I need the formula. So there's like that. Like I'm not comfortable with uncertainty or not knowing why a decision was made. I mean, I think that's probably human nature, but no, I can't think of one that I was like, what? No. I mean, besides me.
I mean, if you go through the list, I'm going through the list in my head right now, especially the few recent, and it's like, no, I can't. I mean, none that come to my mind, at least, for sure, too. So, last one, Garrett Cortez. He threw in quite a few, obviously.
He told me he was excited about
it. You guys go way back, so. This is a several-part question. If you had to make a video with yourself and 5 of your peers of your era, who would get sections?
Keith, Aaron. Well, now it gets tough.
So that's 3. You, Keith, Aaron.
Yeah, Randall.
And
Danny.
Yeah. That'd be a hell of a video. Okay, so you talked about the nose grab peak. How many times a week do you listen to the Gap Band?
No, not as much as you'd think. No, that, and actually, that the MGMT song from Drive came on the radio the other day, and I mentioned to my wife, I'm like, I couldn't listen to this song for years. Like it would come on, the radio or whatever. I'd skip it next, like, because I don't know. For some reason, that song bothered me after. I chose it. I was pumped on it.
Yeah.
And no, it's not. I'm not a daily Gap Band listener.
Okay, fair enough.
I think they're great. They're a great band. But
I think we wrap this up. Is there anything you want to touch on, or anybody you want to thank?
I mean, no. I mean, it would add another half hour.
We could be here for a lot longer. I can tell you that right now.
No, but no, I just think that they were just super key people along the way. Craig Kennedy, PJ Marks, Kyle Schmidt, Sean Kilgus, Aaron Reed, Josh Letchworth, Bill Doster, Kevin Michael, Bill McCaffrey, all these dudes that really I felt like looked out for me, and just helped put me in great places. And Keith for, everything too. It's just, yeah. And then along the way, the sponsors are great until they're not, until the relationship is kind of a bummer. But Don Wallace, one of those guys I'll always hold high respect for, and for giving me the chance, on the team and everything. So, yeah. And now it's like, I got to thank my wife for, our life and all that. But, yeah.
Love it. Love to hear it. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. That helps out a lot. Throw some comments down in the comments section. And if you guys do want to see who the guests are early, make sure to hit that Patreon. It's a great way to support the podcast. Helps me out a ton. So thanks everyone for tuning in. See you guys next time.